check with Griffin and David. Blank check with Griffin and David. Don't know what to say or to expect. All you need to know is that the name of the show is Blank Check.
How can you walk away from something and then come towards it?
Walk around the podcast.
Small podcast. See, this is what I did. Is JD, our guest, who I haven't introduced yet,
False.
suggested a cat quote for me to open with.
Mm-hmm.
And I very quickly punted the responsibility of impersonating Keith David to you.
I can't do it.
It's impossible.
But I just tried to.
If anyone else
give
could
a deep
do it,
voice, then he'd be out of a job or whatever.
he'd be down
in
2
trouble,
homes.
right?
Right, yeah.
I don't know how many homes Keith David has. Number of homes. I'm Googling it.
Look it up.
Yep. Not seeing an answer to that. Weird that I can't just look that up. Apparently, he's been in more than 300 movies, though.
Is there anyone who that works for who you can just Google number of homes?
Mitt Romney.
Okay.
Remember when that was the thing with Mitt Romney? It was like he has 9 homes or whatever. He's so rich.
You know how there are all those websites that have like completely false celebrity net worth
Yes.
listings? There should be a similar sort of celebrity real estate numbers.
Yeah, how many homes they got?
Right.
Celebrity
and it doesn't have
net
to have
worth-
any connection to reality.
I like celebrity net worth because it's like if I was asked how much a celebrity is worth. That's what
Yes.
it always feels like to me. Where they're like, I don't know, $5 million. Like it's just like someone's just kind of like thinking about it for 5 seconds.
It's also funny. I feel like the last time I checked it was like $150,000. And I'm like, how come I'm the only one who doesn't have an inflated?
I think there should be a sibling site to that where it just guesstimates how happy they are.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I will say that when I Googled your net worth, it says various things such as that you are a Pisces.
True. I'm cusp, but
You're a Pisces.
Okay.
That you're American, that you're white.
Correct.
Religion believes in God. Nothing listed there.
Pretty much the opposite. I have a religion and I'm not sure I believe in God.
Residence, and I just like this. This is the only thing I want to read. He lives in an unknown fashion in New York City, New York.
Yeah, that's
I
pretty
just like the
dead
weird
on.
AI generated like descriptions. He lives in an unknown fashion. So
I mean,
like, he's in New York. That's all we can
as
say.
friends of Griffin,
House,
I think
apartment,
we can all.
boats?
Yes,
Yeah,
no,
we can all say
dead on.
it's unknown.
It's
yes.
dead on. It's dead on. Zach Cherry, friend of the podcast, future guest. I'll say that. We looked up his celebrity net worth or his AI generated biography on some site like that, and there was the best line I've ever seen on one of these, which is, "He is very funny. He is always making jokes."
He is always making jokes.
They're getting it right.
Yeah.
Zach Cherry, very funny. Griffin lives in an unknown fashion.
Unknown fashion.
Oh, wow, Zach Cherry, a Scorpio. Amazing.
Sam Rogal, another friend of the podcast, past and future guest, has said to me, sometimes at just random moments in the day, I stop and think, how is Griffin existing at this moment?
Yes, the
Like,
stress
what
of being
do you
your friend.
do on a day-to-day basis?
What do you have in your oven? Like, what do you store in there?
Oh, a lot of things.
I bet it's like toys.
But not
Books.
like, not oven things.
Like shoes, toys, like stuff.
No, I have a proper place for the shoes, but yeah, toys and books, basically. Some paperwork. My social security card, birth certificate.
He does it so if anyone comes knocking, he can just burn it all.
Yes,
Yeah, exactly.
Smart.
Yeah.
That's smart.
Hey, everybody.
Mm-hmm.
This is a podcast called Blank Check with Griffin and David. I'm Griffin.
I'm David.
It's a podcast about filmographies, directors who have massive success early on in their careers and are given a series of blank checks to make whatever crazy passion projects they want. And sometimes those checks clear, and sometimes they bounce, baby.
Mm-hmm.
This is a mini-series on the films of Henry Selick. It is called Ben Hosley's The Podmare Before Castmas.
Oh, man.
I'm taking credit for this miniseries.
Yeah.
You're the producer.
Right,
Producers always should be listed above the title.
Producers always get above the title credit. That's how film works.
And the
That
director is
is how
forgotten.
It works.
And this podcast has a director, and we don't talk about him.
We don't talk about him ever. Our guest today, returning to the main feed, returning to the public, who's been demanding to talk Coraline, the best use of 3D in the history of cinema.
I'll say it. I mean, it's my favorite use of 3D in the history. I don't think a 3D... That's my
Griff is trying to revive a non-argument from years ago. I can't even remember what episode.
This is like this is one of the Star Wars episodes.
I think
Probably.
it is the Star Wars episode.
Yes.
That sounds right.
Yeah,
because we were probably discussing technology.
Yeah.
Movie pioneering.
JD
technology.
Amato is here to talk Coraline.
Hello, it's so good to be back.
Hi, JD. It's nice to have you back.
We had a couple. There was a couple on the books that went off the books because of busyness stuff. So it's been a minute.
Wait, what was on the books? You were supposed to be on Evil Dead 2 at one point. That's what.
And
is that what you're referring
another one
to?
I'm forgetting.
There was another one. I don't remember what, but it's been a minute.
I mean, there's your fabled April Fool's Day episode, which will never happen. It's
right.
done.
And that's your decision, by the way, to be clear.
Yeah, I mean...
It was an idea. It gestated. You explored it, and you kind of put it away, and we supported you.
Yeah, well, also COVID.
COVID and
yes.
stuff
and it's like
that.
the enthusiasm. It was something that would have...
It was a cute idea when
it would have
was an
made sense in 2019
It
or
would be
whatever.
ridiculous for us to do it now. It would be bad.
Yeah.
No one would be
But I
into
also
it anymore.
don't know if we should say what it is
No,
in
no,
case,
we shouldn't.
in
We
case
shouldn't.
we ever
Yeah,
suddenly feel
or whatever,
like...
but like,
yes.
No. No, I like
it was from like
mystery.
a looser, junkier time in the podcast too.
Yes.
Where it's kind of like, I don't know, could we do some stupid thing?
Exactly. I don't think it would fit now.
JD, am I allowed to say that you're kind of like a Michael Clayton of TV shows?
Okay,
that's interesting.
Describe.
Well,
you know who Michael Clayton is from the film Michael Clayton, George Clooney.
Yes.
Yeah, he's like a fixer.
Right.
It's like he's on staff and everyone's like, oh, he's a lawyer. And they're like, well, he is a lawyer. Like, he passed the bar.
Well, I'm not even saying that thing. Like the opening
But
scene of
he's
Michael
here to
Clayton
fix
is like
things.
Dennis O'Hare calling Michael Clayton at 3:00 in the morning. And Michael Clayton's
Right.
like, fuck, okay, this is my number one priority now.
Yes.
I got to solve this.
Yeah.
And you have a lot of jobs that will come up very last minute.
Yes.
And that then become all consuming for a couple of months.
Yeah.
Some of them are publicly known, some of them are not.
Yep.
But so a couple of times over the last couple of years, we've like had an episode on the books.
Yes.
And then we're not trying to withhold JD from the public. JD is not hiding, but sometimes logistically it becomes impossible.
Yeah, it's been. I mean, there's been so many ups and downs of career stuff, COVID stuff, all of that things.
Which is weird because the entertainment industry has never been better. It's the most comfortable, calm, and stable it's ever been.
Well, the hard thing is that you're the pod. Well, here, I'll say this: it has been so much fun to watch the podcast continue to grow and evolve and become such a big thing. We were talking earlier about when I first did the podcast, we were in a basement of a bar talking about Star Wars. And
Well,
now
You're
conflating
conflating two things. Yeah, the basement of the bar was where he did his
Was talking
Chris
TCGS.
Gethard show.
Oh, I guess that. Oh,
But
yes.
but
we
it
were
was
in
the
we were
four
in a
of
broom
us.
closet.
You're in a broom closet.
It was the four of us.
That's true.
That was the first time David and
Yes.
I ever did a
Right.
podcast together, was him subbing in for Riley Solner on the episode you did.
Right.
Yeah.
But anyways, the point being now it's been so fun to see how many fans and how much people love this show
Mhm.
to the point where, no joke, I've been in meetings, like meetings with people who are big people in the industry, and they'll be like, I'm a big blankie. I'm a huge fan of, and they'll like want to talk to me about like Speed Racer or something. So it's been truly, I feel like I get like,
I mean, to be fair, that meeting was with Papa Racer, right?
yes, that
Pops Racer.
that was
Fuck.
it was with Pops
Fuck.
Racer. Yes.
I was like, what's his Papa or Pops? I can't remember.
Yes. Not John Goodman.
No, Pops.
Yeah, Pops.
Yeah.
So it's been so fun to see all of that stuff happen.
But no, actually, it was with Royalton because they were trying to get him to sign on the dotted
Oh, yes.
line. To
Sure.
do,
Royalton, yeah.
Royalton content.
Royalton,
They're trying
I
to launch a streaming service.
Royalton wanted some workflow help with how they're producing stuff, so I got pulled in.
I don't know if I ever shared this anecdote on mic before, and maybe I'll keep it anonymous. But a friend of the show who works in television had a meeting with development execs.
Yeah.
And they were noting him on something that he thought was stupid. And he pushed back by saying, on a recent episode of Blank Check, Griffin and David were citing this other movie as an example of a story getting away with not having to do that and actually working out better. And the exec went, Blank Check said that? Interesting. And backed off the note.
Oh my gosh. You guys are note busters?
That's great.
That's maybe the most satisfying thing I've heard about our podcast accomplishing, is killing bad exec notes.
I think that's great.
I heard a similar story, and I won't reveal the source, but there was, someone who was facing kind of a similar situation, and the executive was just like, I think that this scene is just too dry. And the person pushed back, and they were like, but producer Ben
Yeah.
This is ridiculous.
loves wet stuff, and I just really think we need to keep this scene moist as hell.
Why is this scene about dry, law-abiding citizens?
Yeah.
Wet cry.
All right.
This
it's nice
has
to have you
been
back, JD.
Yes,
It's nice to be here.
This is one of those episodes that was sort of just pinned of, obviously, Selick will happen eventually if Wendell and Wild ever comes out, and JD will do Coraline.
Have you seen Wendell and Wild yet?
I have not seen Wendell and Wild yet.
It is
Ben and I-
available to see.
Oh, is it?
Just saw it this week.
Mm.
At the time we're recording, it will go up on Netflix tonight.
Wow.
Oh, like, right. It's going up on Netflix.
Yes,
Yeah,
there's been an unpublicized Oscar qualifying theatrical run,
Oh, I didn't know that.
barely.
Yeah.
And then it's going up on Netflix tonight. At the time of the recording, it will have been out for months by the time people listen to this. But fucking rules.
It's good. You like it?
I really like it.
Ooh.
I really like it, and I'll say this. This might be one of the harder director rankings at the end of this mini.
Oh, I
Interesting.
was about to ask, and I'm like, oh, I forgot you do the full ranking at the end.
We
I can't
do.
ask. It can't. Also, it's not. This is a hard one because there's only 5
There's
movies.
only
It's only
five.
5. I mean, like Fosse was a similar deal,
Right.
But this they're pretty close together.
I know
Okay,
what you
can
mean.
I ask a question?
Okay.
Are your ones clear to you?
Yes.
I think 1 and 2. I think they're 2 movies pretty much dead tied for 1 and 2. I haven't rewatched Monkey Bone as of the time of this recording.
Okay,
But I
rude.
think 3, 4, and 5 might also all be on a similar level. I think there's
2
1,
levels.
2 at like 5-star masterpiece, and then 3 movies I put between 3 and 4.
Interesting.
I mean, I would agree with that. I know what the number 1 is.
Yeah, I think that's clear.
Yeah.
We're not going to say it.
We're
though,
not going
are
to
we?
say it. This is why I think
Okay,
it'll be interesting
fine.
in the next episode.
All right. Well, I'm not going to say anything.
I mean,
but
I
I will
think it's.
say I do
I
have
think it's
something I
just
want to say
culturally
about
clear.
Coraline.
Yes.
This is my favorite film that Henry Selick has directed. I'm not giving anything away or
okay,
whatever, but
yeah.
like this would be my favorite film
Yeah.
he's made.
Right.
Okay, so that's like a hint.
Interesting.
That's
Interesting.
like a little dusting of clues
Interesting.
for people to you know they can follow the trail.
Yeah, I mean, this movie fucking rips. It is so good. Ben, you had not seen it before.
Really?
No.
Okay.
I've
Never hung
never
out with
seen
Coraline before. She's kind of Benny.
Yeah, she
You know,
is
cool, spooky.
Oh,
kid digging
She's
around in
also,
the
like,
mud.
a little stinker. Like she's
definitely a
Yeah,
little
she's got a
stinker.
tood.
She's a little
Definitely
brat.
got some tood. I think even like sort of similar dynamics somewhat with my parents. They both were like working pretty
Ben.
hard.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow. Ben-
Only child.
Only child.
I wasn't even making that
with
connection.
workaholic parents.
You
Yes.
talk a lot about your like only child syndrome with older
Symptoms.
first-time parents who were very preoccupied with their careers and adult stuff, quote unquote,
Yeah,
and didn't have time to like entertain you
definitely.
or go to your level. I did not think about how hard this movie might hit for you until right now.
Yeah, it got me in a place where it's so dreamlike, and so I feel like it really tapped into some kind of interior place.
Okay, here's a starter question.
Because the 3 of us have siblings, JD, David, and I.
Yes, I got 2 older sisters.
Mm-hmm.
What's our sibling count here?
I'm oldest of 3,
Right.
but my brother's 3 years younger, so I didn't have very long as sole domain. Yeah.
Same. I'm the older brother. I do have a half sister, but I didn't grow up with her, so like that sort of doesn't. It's different. Vibe.
That's weird. So she was in New York, but you didn't grow up with her?
I'm not
Go
even
on,
gonna
JD.
answer that.
Ben, what was your? I forget your siblings.
I'm an only
He's
child.
an only child.
Right.
Is what
Like
I'm saying.
Coraline.
He's
Right.
like Coraline.
Right. Okay. Yes. Understood. Got it.
Classic Coraline, Ben over here.
Yeah, Ben's a bit of a Coraline.
Yeah, I was an unpleasant kid too.
I don't think Coraline is unpleasant.
Well,
I'm
okay,
with
here's-
her.
I do, but I
she's
think
a
it's
little brittle.
I think
or
it's
a little,
a strength of the movie.
Yeah. Because she's definitely in pain mode. She's pain in the neck mode for a lot of the movie.
The way that she does it, like she can't make friends really.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
related to.
Right. She's a
lot.
little prickly on
A
first
little. I
meeting.
mean, there's one kid you see her interact with the entire movie.
Yeah, to be fair, he's a little annoying.
I know, but she just comes on so hard
she
from the
roasts
get go.
I mean, it is also
And
that
at the
kind
end of the movie, she's sort of like jokingly negging him.
How old do we think? Like Coraline's what, like 11 or whatever, right?
I think so.
So
Should we
here's a
look it up?
question.
Yeah.
I want to start with.
Because I do feel like when you're like 10, 11, like boys and girls back then.
We're going to
especially-
dig into the psychology of Coraline as a character.
Has anyone here read the book?
No, I've not. I feel like we're a generation too old for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that
I've
book
read
came out
Okay.
in 2002, so I would have been like 16.
Right.
Yeah, and I was
Like
whatever.
Romilly, my sister, read it, and I feel like not only read it, but it was just like one of the books that everyone reads.
It's it's a slim volume.
I think it has
150
continued
pages.
generationally
Yeah.
as one of the books that every kid reads when they can read
Oh,
chapter
interesting.
books for the
Well,
first time.
The book is really, really good. I really recommend it. Honestly, if anything in Coraline piqued your interest, the movie, I would say read the book.
It's Neil Gaiman.
It's Neil Gaiman. They're different in a lot of ways. One of the things that I think is interesting that I wanted to bring up is that in the book, I think Coraline's much younger. She feels much younger.
Yeah.
The Coraline in the movie feels much older and a lot more emotionally verbal.
Yeah.
Yes, right.
Which I thought was very interesting.
She's quite capable.
Yes.
Which is, I love that in a animated protagonist. Like,
Yeah.
she's still a kid, but she's like a pretty independent, happily independent kid.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And very self-assured.
She's quite self-assured, although I would say, her prickliness maybe belies a little bit of self-consciousness.
Yeah,
yeah.
That's another thing that I thought was interesting is that in the adaptation, the movie, a lot of the characters are a little pricklier than in the book, which is was always interesting to me because it's got a little.
This movie was made by a warm-hearted and generous man who's always nice, so I don't get that at all.
Yeah, well, there is a lot of it's for a kids movie. There's a lot of edge running through this in a lot of ways, which I think we're going to touch on. Is there's moments where you're like, a kids movie? This is what
But this is what I mean.
So
this is one of the reasons this is a great film.
Yes.
And the fact that this kid's fantasy, that's why I asked her age. I really think I'm going to say she's 11. I'm going to say she's basically like a fifth grader.
Yeah.
Right.
The fantasy of a kid that age is still like, I get everything I want. And it's almost a little mean. You know what I mean? It's so selfish the paradise she's being offered.
Right.
It's not just like whatever, video games and cakes. It's like, he's silent because you don't like when he talks.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That slightly unnerving, lack of empathy that kids have.
The fascinating thing that she resents that her parents don't conform to traditional 50s sitcom gender roles.
Right.
That she wants her dad to act like father knows best, and she wants her mom to be in the kitchen baking with an apron on.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting, right, is in the book and the movie, in particular, right, the exploration seems to be of that thing that you go through as a kid, right? As you have all these hopes and dreams of what you want your life to be.
Yes.
And then when you actually interface those, you realize that's like, oh, the life that you have is the life that you want, which I would say is the theme of every Henry Selick film.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yes.
Sure. Yeah.
I'm a big proponent of the fact that I think for a lot of directors, most of their films are about themselves in some way, right? And I think it's interesting because I can think of a lot of categories of directors, but I can break people down into two. There's directors who make the same film over and over again, and there's directors that make a lot of different movies.
Yes.
I always think it's so interesting. A lot of people sometimes begrudge directors or creators that create the same thing over and over again, where it's like they're just doing the same thing.
But if they're good, they're revealing different.
Yes, and I think that's fascinating to me because what that means is that person's trying to work something out,
right?
And they're just gonna keep
that's their
doing
life's work. I support it.
This is another thing
and
I
some
find.
directors shouldn't stray outside of what
Absolutely.
they're good at. And when they try, you're like, oh, they don't have any connection to
right?
this.
Or they're not passionate. It's like they're not.
Yeah, exactly.
There's not a there that they're trying to wrestle with or process.
No, and I mean, it's so often when people have this sort of oh, great, another one of these attitudes. I'm like, do you actually want to see that director make the type of movie that you claim you want to see?
Right.
Would you not rather see someone else make that type of film?
Right.
This person's film cannot be for your liking, but it's like if you're complaining that Wes Anderson is making a twee outsiders versus systems comedy tinged with pathos and father issues, then it's like, what do you think you want out of him? Maybe you just don't like him. That's fine.
Now, to that end,
yeah,
Henry Selick is particularly funny because it is so specifically the same story over and over again, right?
Yes.
Sure.
It is always a character who's lured by their circumstance to another universe.
Sure. So like a Skellington being lured to Christmas Town, a James being lured to Peach World,
a man being lured to the interiority of his creativity or whatever.
Right.
And it's a place that at first might be somewhere they want to be. That's their dream. They like it, and then it becomes evil, or there's challenges that they don't anticipate, or that aren't going to solve the thing. And then at the end, their desires to get back to the world in which they started.
The status quo.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the one exception to this is the flip of James, where, and we talked about this a lot in the episode. The first 20 minutes of James are like the most unpleasant reality ever committed to film. That is the one in which the character is correct to not want to be where he is. And the thing he's dreaming of is everything that he hoped it would be.
And he
has family and friends. He goes to New York City. Rocco Dunlap points at him. Everything's perfect, right? That's the one that's flipped. But it is this thing I find fascinating, and it really clicked for me watching Nightmare Before Christmas this time, is like very often Selick characters don't really learn their lesson.
Right.
They return to where they started,
right,
but with a sort of arrogance.
Right. Jack Skellington definitely doesn't really learn his lesson.
You have this musical number that's literally called like Jack's Lament, Poor Jack, that ends with him being like, no, fuck that. I'm not going to feel bad about myself. I fucking killed this. Best Christmas
Jack.
ever.
The Pumpkin
King. Like, he goes back twice as resolute.
James, again, I mean, obviously it's based on a novel,
He's
but like
he
overcomes his fear of death and like what his parents went through. But he confronts something and moves,
and he comes back to reality.
So he's a little different.
And I will not spoil Wendell Wild for you, but there's a sort of a reality underworld thing, right?
Got it.
But there's also a the current day version of this town and the past version of the town thing. He's once again dealing with, there's always two realities.
Yeah.
There's a character who starts in one, dreams of being in the other.
Right.
It's always macabre, kind of.
Yeah,
too.
He's spooky. He's a spooky fuck.
Yeah.
But I like it's. I remember, because I took Romley, my sister, to see this. She would have been
2009, so she's
11.
10 years old. Yeah,
she's 11 at the time.
She's Coraline aged.
Perfect age for this. Has read the book, loves the movie, and they were talking about it at school. And her teacher was like, "That's not a good movie."
Wait, really?
And she was affected enough by this that she went back and was like, "My teacher was arguing that Coraline wasn't good. You agree with me that Coraline's great, right?" And I was like, "Yeah, what's his fucking argument?" And she was like, "He says it's like dramatically bad because she starts out being sort of a brat and she doesn't really learn her lesson. At the end of the movie, she's still a brat." And I'm like, I think that's interesting.
I don't think that's true, though. I think she does learn a
changed,
lesson.
But I think it's not in the sort of holistic, completely transformed way that a lot of very pat movies would give you.
But she learns the lesson of like, I shouldn't take my annoying parents for granted. They're all right.
Yes, it's a very clear lesson learned.
My life circumstances.
But a lot of movies would be her hugging them, crying, being a perfect little girl, this and that. Even when she like goes to YB and she's sort of like, "No, you're all right by me," she's still negging him when she does that.
But like the spirit,
I like that no one changes that much in a way that's somewhat realistic within a Selick movie.
I also think there's a thing that happens, and we don't have to go too far down this rabbit hole, but there is a notion, especially in American entertainment, that holds on to the like Campbell-esque hero's journey as the definer of what a story is.
And the only...
Yes, and it drives me nuts.
Yes, right.
Because there's people that are like, a story arc, like, a beginning, middle, end, it's an arc, you come back, and it's like, that is a type of story that is a, obviously, you can get into the intersectionality of where that comes from and what that represents in terms of like the Greek and Roman storytelling being passed down through their empire, all this stuff. But I think
it's very limiting.
Yes, and it's very limiting. And I think some great stories don't fit into that rubric, and I think that can unsettle people when it's not like, oh, the exact same. And not just the Coraline's pretty hero's journey-y, so we're not far off there.
It's questy, and
but even still, he sort of defies that always, because the growth is so kind of quiet and internal. As much as there are crazy externalized circumstances around the characters, It does feel like it's slight changes that happen within them.
Yeah, I mean, it's hitting all the beats of the Campbell-esque.
Sure.
But the point being, I like a character sometimes that doesn't learn their lesson.
Yes.
Because the point of storytelling to me is not that the character has to learn the lesson, it's that the viewer, the audience learns.
Well, that's fair. That's a good point. I like that. I mean, I agree with you on that. And it's fair. People don't always have to be learning lessons. Lessons are overrated. But this movie reminds me a lot of Spirited Away, one of my favorite movies ever.
Very similar.
And like there's a lot of movies, for a lot of children's stories along these lines where the lesson is more like you lose your parents are taken away for whatever reason, temporarily.
Yeah.
You have to, struggle on your own. And then when you get them back, you have improved or you have had that experience and you're happy to see them. But you are different because you're like, well, I did make it without you.
Right.
And there's like, that's like very satisfying
and
when
also,
you're a kid.
Also, that you kind of know the world sucks now. Like, there's something about this exact age we're talking about, 11.
You've matured.
Yes,
where you're starting to become autonomous enough that you're like, why is anyone fucking telling me what to do? Why can't I do everything the way I want to? But the sort of like crushing existential dread of like teenagerdom has not hit yet.
Yes, 12-year-old. Has anyone ever read, you probably haven't, but has anyone here ever read the book The Thief of Always by Clive Barker?
Yes, I have read that.
Yes, that's a similar book, a similar story to this. It's
and Barker and Gaiman both sort of...
They're similar guys.
Right.
British,
who like making
freaks.
children's stories, even though that's not their
They'll
number one thing.
occasionally dabble in young adult, and you're like, ooh, this is spicy for young adult.
Right.
And it was one of my favorite books as a child. And I've read it a million times, but it's the same thing of like the kid is tempted to another place that's a paradise. The paradise is a false paradise. When it's the same lesson of like, he's going home, he'll be safe. He remains a kid.
Yeah.
It's not like he's going home and he's 35 years old.
Yeah.
But he did all this on his own, and that's valuable.
Yeah. And this takes place in the Hellraiser universe?
Yeah, it does not. But you should read it. You'll read it in a day. It's so fucking good.
A little aside. I always think about how the one Cenobite as a kid, and it really messes me up.
Yeah, that sucks.
That's really
I just
dark.
rewatched Hellraiser.
That's like when a kid is raised in Scientology. You're like, you didn't even give him a chance.
Yeah, sure.
Because there's the point.
Well, these Cenobites are always fucking. They're going to have kids.
Ben can't relate to this. Ben looks like flummoxed about why that would be a curse to be a Cenobite
I'm sorry,
child.
what?
Well, then why are you looking at me confused that I'm saying one of the Cenobites a kid?
Ben is confused by you presenting that as a negative.
Yeah, I don't get it.
Okay,
what's wrong with that?
All the Cenobites, like, at some point revert back to like what they looked like as normal people when they like summoned the lament configuration, and like one of them's like a kid, and I'm like, that's dark.
Sure.
It makes me uncomfortable.
Ben spent his entire...
Hellraiser doesn't make me uncomfortable most of the time.
Ben spent his entire
It's
childhood...
definitely a very comfortable movie.
Just quick
rooting
vote here.
around for lament configurations. He was trying to become a Cenobite child.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just vote here. If we all had the lament configuration, who here would have put it together and just summoned the Cenobites willfully?
Well, what do I know?
You know.
I know what's going to happen.
Yeah, you know.
eBay, whatever. Yeah. Like it's gone. I don't want it. But I think the idea of the lament configuration is like, if you're being handed it, the guy already knows you want to fuck with it.
Yes,
and he's not just like, oh, I found this, and you figure it out yourself. It's like it's someone who's just like, look, I've tried everything.
Right, and it's you have the carnal call to it. Like you're not. It's.
I mean, it would be seconds later. I would have it.
The guy with the whatever antique dealer wouldn't even be done explaining what it is, and Ben would be like, I finished it.
He would be drawing in his breath to blow the dust off, and I would already.
Ben would post wanted ads for lament configurations on Craigslist.
I just rewatched Hellraiser because
it's got eBay alert.
Ben's hooking the things into him, and Pinhead's like, calm down.
Yeah, right. He takes them himself. Give me those hooks. I was upstate with David Ehrlich.
Humble brag.
And he'd never seen it. And I was like, all right, fuck. And
I've never seen Hellraiser?
Yes. And I was like, one of those things.
He calls himself a critic.
Exactly. And we put it on. And of course, to his surprise, the Cenobites don't show up in that movie for like a full hour.
Yes.
Yeah.
And he was like, wait, this movie is about like a lady who like cucked her husband with his filthy brother? Like, because that's mostly what Hellraiser is about for a while.
It's one of those franchises.
Dude, it's about a guy so horny he had to call the Cenobite.
The
he's
first
just like, I've done it all.
it's one of those franchises where the first movie is so different from the cultural idea of what the franchise
Barker
is.
had no control of the sequels, and the sequels, they were like, Cenobites wall to wall, right? I mean,
also,
people want.
Hellraiser like 6 is like, it's like a cop drum. It's like a Saw movie. Anyways.
Yeah. No,
I want to pause for a moment and just
something
imagine
Cenobite about this murder.
That's what it is.
Something like from the Book of
detective.
Saw. Yeah.
I want to imagine the image for a second of the two Davids upstate in a little log cabin with a fire going and hot cocoa in their hands and a blanket.
Wives and children left back home in New York.
No, they were there. I mean,
no, but this is the image I want.
The whole thing. I take these trips with David every year. We always leaf peep. We always have a leaf peeping weekend. Me and David and our
leaf peeping weekend.
You know, you go upstate, you peep some leaves because it's the leaves are changing.
Did you create this term?
No, definitely.
Oh no, that's
a leaf peeping week. I mean, I
leaf peeping.
Defer to you as the peeper. I've never heard this.
You've peeped a leaf or two.
Oh, absolutely. I love peeping.
And we actually nailed the weekend. This was
leaf
very
peeping. He's actually
good.
He's colors. The one who made it the United States before.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah, the America should have been called Peep Sylvania. Anyway. But that's an old Jon Stewart joke that always got me, where the Amerigo Vespucci, right? Yeah. He was like, there's a reason, it's not called Vespuccian Idol. I always thought that was funny. We watch all ritual movies, sort of by we watched that movie, The Ritual.
Yeah.
Yes.
Have you seen it?
Yeah, that's a ritual.
I think I've seen The Ritual.
It has a good monster in it. It's not very good.
Which one's the wait?
It's like a bunch of guys go hiking in Sweden, and classic this trail's too long. Let's take a shortcut through the haunted forest.
Things work out well.
2017? No, I have not seen it.
It's not that good, but it has a good monster. It has a fun monster.
I love a good monster.
And then we watched Lair of the White Worm. Have you seen that? The Ken Russell movie?
No.
Great movie.
Check
that out. Here. Very campy 80s. Ken Russell at the end of his life. Young Hugh Grant.
Oh, Ritual is the Bruckner, the Night House Hellraiser.
The Night House guy. Yeah, yeah. And of course he did the Hellraiser.
He did
reboot.
the new Hellraiser.
And then so when Hellraiser came up, I was like, look, we're in Ritual territory. This is like the most ritual movie ever. It's all rituals. Yeah. Rituals wall to wall. Anyway, I can't remember why I was talking about this.
So anyways, Coraline completes the lament configuration and is summoned to the other universe.
It's the same thing of you do the thing you probably shouldn't do, right? You open the door, you go to the place,
you're summoned to the void.
And you are summoned, and it is now you're in another world where it's like, what are the rules here?
Yes. And to get back to where this all started, which was what Griffin was saying, was there is a thing in cinema or in life that we explore through cinema, that age of 6 to 11, where you start experiencing this desire for independence, but it's not the teenage desire for independence where you want to fly from the nest. It's that you want to know that you can fly from the nest.
You just you want to push against the boundary, maybe get your hand out, and then be like, okay, all right.
And I will say,
and then you retreat into being like, I want my parents to fucking do shit for me while they still can. There becomes a balance of, what do I want my parents to fucking handle so I don't have to deal with? Which adult responsibilities do I want to avoid, and which things do I want to push further away from?
Yes, and once that's taken away, the comfort of your parents, it's a really scary feeling. And I think the master of this is Miyazaki, right? You look at all of his, Totoro is the great example of that. It's this fear of being without your parents.
I think Spirited Away is the because it's scarier. Because the parents literally transform. It's frightening. You don't know if they're coming back, and then of course her identity is under threat. Totoro is the more younger kid.
Yes, it's even younger.
Where it's we're being independent, and your parents are still there. But
you understand that they could not be there, and that's the fear
that's what they're kind of working through.
I feel like this is a thing that gets thrown around too often and perhaps too lightly now. But this does feel like one of those few movies you could put into American Ghibli-esque films.
Yes.
Yeah, and a big part of it is, all the movies we've been talking about, the first two purely stop motion Selick movies are 75 minutes long, right?
Right.
Most stop motion films were 75 minutes long.
Takes a while to make these things.
Yeah.
This movie is 140. It's pretty much 134 before credits. That extra 15 minutes, it feels like is mostly devoted to, the term is ma, right? Isn't ma the term that Miyazaki uses for like the sort of moments of existence in between the story, the plot. Like there's things in this movie, like when Coraline is playing, sort of occupying herself with the lump in the rug.
I wrote that down as I was watching it.
Yeah.
To me, that's the moment that I felt was this film operating at its best. When there's this sort of bunched up part of the carpet that she keeps stepping on.
I love all
that
that stuff.
To me, that was the moment that felt.
Or when she goes to the clothing store with her mother and she's trying to get her attention.
Yeah.
This movie has robust prologue, epilogue that I feel like would be the thing you'd cut if you're like, fuck, we can only afford 70 minutes of
But also,
movie.
for a movie that's so much about the boredom of this girl, it does spend time in the boredom. It does spend time in that feeling it evokes so well of when you're a child and you're looking for anything to keep you entertained, how to turn anything into a game, especially if you're lonely, you know? And, you know, animation is so difficult. I feel like this is sort of the point that Miyazaki always tries to make, is that, like, most people don't want to spend the effort to depict those small moments, because those small moments aren't free in the way they are in a live action film, where you can just have an actor.
You're not Malik. You can't just point a camera at a dandelion
for 10 seconds on screen, right? That you have, it takes as much craft to make this thing happen. It's so expensive. It's so time consuming, but those moments are really important. And especially for this film and setting like a tone and a mood that is very different than most American animated films. As much as this falls into the spooky stop motion world,
it is spooky.
There's a patience and like a weird quiet to this movie.
Yeah, I will say, since I know sometimes as a blank check listener myself, I haven't watched the movie sometimes. And so to those who are catching up, the basic premise of Coraline is she's like
go through the plot.
Let me crack open the dossier and then we can talk about the plot. All right. So we haven't talked Monkey Bone yet, full disclosure.
We have not recorded that episode yet.
Interesting.
Ben has yet to get boned.
Oh my gosh.
I have not boned
Ben. So Monkey Bone was maybe like the most anticipated film of my childhood.
It was way up there for me as well.
I was like, because I knew I was a big animation nerd. And I knew who Henry Selick was, and I was like, "Oh my gosh!"
Making a live-action film.
And I feel like the premise of Monkey Bone is like the first idea most kids have when they're like, "Oh," and then you go inside, and all the characters from like it's such a classic. And so I was like, "This is gonna maybe be the best movie ever made."
Did you see it?
I did see it.
And what'd you think?
It's a very long movie, is what I remember as a kid.
Right, but as a kid, you were not like, I like that. I don't get why people didn't like it.
No, I struggled with it as a kid.
I liked it a lot as a kid. I'm very curious to rewatch it. I haven't seen it in probably 20 years, but I watched it multiple times as a kid and was always a defender, even in the face of like most people shitting on it. It was equally anticipated for me, but I was at an age where I was capable of clocking a movie like that as a disappointment. Like, Burton Planet of the Apes is that same year, and I was like, I know this isn't working. I can't even lie to myself that much on this one.
I think Monkey Bone is the first time that I was like, oh, it might.
There is that thing when you're a kid.
It might not be. Oh,
also when you see movies when you're again around 10 or 11, you start being like, I didn't like that.
Right.
I think
because
I used to like every movie ever, but this one wasn't so good. Yeah,
exactly. Like, because I remember I liked Monkey Bone. I'm sure there's stuff in it now as an adult I'd watch and really enjoy and be like, oh, that's cool. But I remember as a kid being like, oh, this isn't what I imagined it was going to be. I remember my parents would always talk about Dark Crystal that way, where like I loved the Dark Crystal as a kid, and they're like, it's so long. It's a really long movie, and I was always like, no, it's great because that was what a movie was.
It's also not that long.
Really?
It's like 90 minutes long.
I think it probably just felt long.
It's really slow, that film. A movie I love. And it also is like incredibly oblique plot-wise. Like it's one of those movies where famously Henson wanted to try to tell the story with as little dialogue as possible. And originally it made no sense. But to this point, Monkey Bone was highly anticipated and then was for a long time in that state where it was like delayed for a very long time, very extended post-production process. They moved it around the schedule like 18 times. It finally comes out. It's dumped at the beginning of the year.
This is what I was going to say.
It bombed really.
It made $5 million against a $75 million budget, and that's before everything. You know,
it was
marketing or
one
whatever.
Of the biggest flops of its year, and there was a real sort of gang up like. This is a disaster.
But a huge problem was that Fox's like animation product, which this was not, but it was still under Bill Mechanic, which who was a disaster. Like Anastasia did well, but Titan AE was a big bomb, and like so like it was developed under Fox Animation, exactly, and by the time it comes out,
Fox Animation is dead, and so it sort of shifted from being a Fox Animation project to a Fox live action project where no one wanted it.
So director jail for Henry Selick.
Yes,
you know, you like. Fuck you. You cost us so much money.
It truly felt like one of those things that he might never come out of. It was such a sort of radioactive bomb.
Yes. Neil Gaiman around that time does hand him his upcoming novella, Coraline. And Selick is intrigued, but also is like, I saw a movie in it, but I felt like it needed more flesh on its bones just because the story is quite short. He did take it to Bill Mechanic, who is like, write a screenplay.
Free agent at this point?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
But like, I guess just looking for a supporter. Gaiman is like, you take it from here. Like, I'm not going to be fussing. Like, I trust you. Like, that's it. Gaiman famously sort of in and out. Sometimes he's very hands-on with adaptations of his work because he's been burned.
But this is around the same time he's doing Mirror Mask, which is like his movie.
That's him and Dave McKean's big like visual project.
Right.
Yeah. The big thing that Selick does obviously is he adds the character of YB.
Yes.
Because he was like, she needs to talk to someone. Like literally. Because the book is obviously, I'm sure, all in her head. Like internal narration or whatever.
I really like Coraline. I'll say it's a movie that I really like. My hot take is I don't think we need YB.
You don't like YB? But he's got a little mask, a little,
I like
welder's
YB,
mask.
but I get where you're coming from.
Because I think it
was necessary, but I do like him as a character.
Because I think it would force us to have more of
David's doing YB posture.
Yeah.
Being YB.
He's got a little Igor.
I think it would force us into having more alone time with Coraline, which maybe would slow down the
I think it just
movie.
might be tough literally for kids to handle that little dialogue.
I think it's true.
Yeah.
But
and also, I like YB. I'm pro YB.
I'm a huge fan of just his fucking mask, helmet, whatever you want to call it.
His little dirt bike.
This is not surprising.
Oh, yeah, I mean, his dirt bike, absolutely.
It would be easy for a character like that, though, on a little dirt bike with a skeleton costume to feel a little like kid movie cool. You know what I mean? Like we're like, oh boy, here comes the kid on the skateboard or whatever. But he's so genuinely awkward, right?
Yeah.
That's sort of sweet.
Yes.
Also, he transplants it to America. That's the other big thing he does. The book is British.
Yes. I also think there's a little bit of literalizing of the events that goes on in the movie that the book is a little more, keeps them internalized a little bit more.
I think the book also, it's like she goes to the other world once and stuck there. Like Selick is the one who makes it more back and forth.
Which I love.
Yeah, me too. Where he's like, I wanted it to
the
build
rules
up.
of how all of these movies work. Like JJ in his dossiers keeps on.
She comes back.
Maybe she does.
Yeah.
He just says he built it up more. Like he wanted her to do multiple. He wanted it to feel like maybe it's a dream, right? Like maybe it's like this is happening when she falls asleep.
Well, I think the book is more like that.
Fair enough.
I think there's like a lot more like story context of YB being like my grandmother's. It becomes more literal. Like this bad thing's actually happening, which I think is not.
Yeah. I hear what you're saying.
The strangest thing is that Bill Mechanic had a production deal with Disney that he had signed that prevented him from developing animated projects specifically. And so they had to initially pretend that they were planning on this being a live action film.
Wow.
And Michelle Pfeiffer was considered for The Other Mother.
I mean, would be
Makes
perfect.
sense.
Yeah.
But that's kind of one reason it just is sort of floating in development for a long time.
I wonder if that was like a non-compete thing, if that's some vestige of his Fox contract.
Like, you can come aboard, buddy, but like we're Disney, so we're already doing animated films.
Right.
You can't like bring us animated films, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, there's also the storied history of Laika's creation, of which this was the
well,
first.
we're gonna get into it.
Because that's so.
But in between. First, the guy who comes to Selick while he's in director jail is Wes Anderson, because Wes Anderson uses him for The Life Aquatic to build the little stop motion animals, the whales or whatever the fuck.
Which it truly feels like this is
what's
Henry
the beast called? What's the
jaguar shark?
Yeah,
but all the aquatic life in Life Aquatic, all the fish are Henry Selick, which I think a lot of people weirdly don't know. But it felt very much like, well, this is what his career is going to be.
Yeah.
He's going to be one of these guys where you're like, oh, Jack Cardiff was like the greatest cinematographer in history. And then he made a film that got nominated for Best Picture. He did a couple more exploitation movies. My voice is all fucked up today. Excuse me. And then pretty much went back to being a cinematographer.
Right.
Like, is this a guy who was indie, commercial, animation director, made a couple movies, and now is just sort of for hire, doing effects on other people's movies, doing short-term projects, small, short-form projects?
Right. But the other thing, of course, the sort of fork in the road thing is that because they collaborate well on Life Aquatic, Selick is like, you should direct Fantastic Mr. Fox, which I'm developing. And Selick was going to do it and backed out because Coraline was suddenly greenlit. And he was like, this was my original project. I'm sorry, I have to do this.
They had it set up at Revolution.
A great studio that never did anything
that's
wrong.
the thing.
Right.
I think it also took a long time for that movie to get off the ground because Revolution was collapsing.
Right.
And eventually Fox had to buy it out of turnaround. But yes, for a couple years there, it was like Wes Anderson and Henry Selick are going to direct this together. And that's his way to get out of jail, is teaming up with another director.
Which, can we imagine? I'm so curious how that collaboration would go.
They're two they're two guys with particular points of view. I have no idea.
Based on sort of like what I've heard
Wes
about.
Anderson seems like a friendly fellow, I will say. No, maybe not.
I have no idea. I've never.
Sure. I don't know. Like in interviews, he doesn't come across as some sort of like
no. I think he's a friendly fellow, but they're both famously control freaks.
Yes,
right. Are incredibly particular, exacting artists.
Exactly.
And of course, Selick says, this is his quote, Wes Anderson's still mad at me, but I said, look, I worked on Coraline before I ever met you, and this opportunity has come up. And he hooked him up with Mark Gustafson, who is like the guy who led animation on it. So like, but I mean, Selick saying Anderson's still mad at me, I think Selick perceives a lot of enemies around him at all times. I don't know to what extent Wes Anderson is mad at him.
Hard to say. Hard to say, but it's like that's a momentary does this get Selick out of jail thing that doesn't happen.
If they fought, who do you think would win?
Physically?
Yeah.
I think Selick. I think Selick is tough to beat. He's wiry.
Yeah.
Well, Selick is like Slender Man.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, though. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it feels like he sort of like scrambles up onto the ceiling and drops on top of you or something.
They both fall into the category of directors who look like they belong in their own movies.
I think Wes Anderson has like a blunderbuss. Like, you know, he's got like sort of weird antique hunting gear.
Yes.
That's his like, like if there's like a Mortal Kombat with like video game with a film director.
Fuck,
have you announced the brawler that you guys are?
We should do a Super Smash Bros with, fucking directors. We should think of more of those.
Yeah, what's the name?
I don't know.
Let's get Joe Bowen on this.
Selick in 2004 is hired at something called Vinton Studios.
Yes,
so which did like claymation.
Will Vinton Studios.
Something called Vinton.
David, your ignorance is showing. Pull your fucking pants up.
I was never claiming not ignorance of Will Vinton.
Will Vinton and Will Vinton Studios, massively important.
He's the California Raisins guy,
10 minutes talking about this. You don't understand how important this is.
I gotta say, love this guy's vibe.
First off, he looks
like he's about to sell me
looks like one of his
taffy.
characters.
So this this opens up like 10 things I need to talk about.
You don't understand how important Vinton is to stop motion animation.
I never, ever said otherwise. I want to be
something called.
I'm cold reading a dossier. I am not saying anything else.
JD.
Okay?
You said Will Vinton doesn't matter, and we're here to.
I didn't say something meaningless called.
You said he can lick your farts.
God damn it.
David.
Yeah.
Once again, for the first time in 2023, this episode, a blank check.
The 23 trumpet.
Yeah, no, I knew, I recognized it. This episode's brought to you by Mubi. Couldn't be more thrilled to have them on board for another year.
Curated streaming service dedicated to elevating great cinema. Each and every film hand-selected. Your own personal film festival. It's streaming anytime, anywhere. Go off, Mubi.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You can watch Mubi anywhere.
It's a good app. It's a good functional app.
That's a good point. And the thing with Mubi is it's great.
Mm-hmm. You discover the best of cinema at your fingertips, streaming anytime, anywhere. And there are two specific things David.
Yeah, there's two cool things that they want to
I
recommend.
specifically want to point out
that are
streaming right now in the US and in many other countries, exclusively on Mubi. Number 1, The Kingdom Exodus.
Kingdom Exodus, which is I guess it's sort of the third season of Lars von Trier's sort of intermittent hospital television masterpiece.
His Twin Peaks.
That's exactly what it is.
Yes.
It is his Twin Peaks.
Yes.
He did a third season, and it's really, really cool and interesting. It's a ghost story about a hospital built on top of the bleaching ponds in Copenhagen, where evil and science are interacting. Have you ever seen The Kingdoms? They're so good.
I have not. I need to. I weirdly own them on VHS. Friend of the show, Joe Garden, gave them to me once. It is premiering on Mubi. It's on Mubi right now exclusively, The Kingdom Exodus. And the restored versions of Kingdom 1 and 2 are exclusively on Mubi right now. So you got the whole series right there.
They've also, of course, got Decision to Leave.
Decision to Leave.
Park Chan-wook's
2022
masterclass.
Yes. Now, I just finally saw it.
Oh, did you?
Big blind spot for me.
Getting ready for the blankies, are you?
I am. And I'll say this about it. It is absolute movie I think you need to watch twice.
That's true. It's actually really good on a second viewing. I haven't seen it twice.
15 minutes into the movie, I was like, I can't wait to watch this a second time because I know I'm going to... It is a film that is purposefully kind of disorienting.
Yes.
In a good way. I think it is masterfully made. But I think it is a film that I can only imagine will reward on further viewings. And you can watch it as many times as you want on Mubi.
That's right. It's a twisted romantic thriller and a captivating detective drama, kind of Hitchcockian.
Yeah.
It's a really good movie. Anyway, and
Mubi released it. Mubi was actually the distributor on it. I saw it in a theater yesterday, and there was the Mubi fanfare before it. It was exciting to see. The cineast cow roaring like Leo the lion.
We should probably end this ad, but also I'm watching the Pusher trilogy on Mubi right now, having a great time.
Yes.
You can try Mubi free for 30 days at Mubi.com/check. That's MUBI.com/check for a whole month of great cinema for free. Mubi.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Will Vinton.
Will Vinton
is one of the major figures of stop motion.
Yes.
But who had a hard time getting these huge, never had the platform that I think.
It's expensive.
Yes,
you got to give someone to give you a lot of money for something that might not be a hit.
He literally worked in clay. He was a clay animator. For so long, claymation was a term used interchangeably with stop motion because most stop motion we saw was Aardman and Will Vinton.
Yes. What about
two most prominent studios were working in clay? And I'm
your kids' cartoons like
Spunkmeyer did it exactly. Yes.
Well, Spunkmeyer's more of the taxidermied animal, but I guess he does a lot of clay stuff as well. Yeah. But they were plasticine guys. And Vinton is this very interesting balance of he had a lot of success in things like commercials for hire jobs.
Right.
He's a little bit like Richard Williams, actually.
He did the California Raisins.
Huge.
Yes.
Much like
the Noid, apparently. I'm reading some of his accounts.
Much like Richard Williams doing
the Noid.
Red, yellow, blue, green, and orange M&Ms, all him.
I think the thing that people would maybe most pop culture recognize him for is the stop motion stuff in Moonwalker.
Moonwalker, the Michael Jackson thing.
His style is very distinctive. The look of his characters is very distinctive. If you Google Will Vinton, you'll see a bunch of things you recognize.
Yeah.
But
the PJs?
The Richard Williams comparison, I think, is apt because there were these two guys who were considered absolutely top of their fields, were sort of low-level moguls, had their own studios. Everyone was envious of their craft. They were always in demand for hire gigs, especially commercial gigs and shit, or to come in and pinch hit on some studio project. Their own personal projects, their magnum opuses, were vaguely disastrous.
Sure. Yeah. Right. When they were unfettered or whatever.
The Mark Twain movie does get credited as the first feature-length stop-motion film. Is that correct?
The Adventures of Mark Twain, 1985 stop-motion claymation film.
I believe it holds that title.
Sure. I don't know.
It is a bananas film. Some people might remember it as it was, I feel like, especially in the 90s, a weird, deep cable, constant rotation movie.
Yeah.
It's on Amazon Prime right now. I watched it the other night.
Cool.
It's bizarre.
Sure.
It's two present day kids in a space submarine with Mark Twain. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
They're chasing a comet.
Flying around the galaxy. Yeah.
Cool.
But
not a hit. Right.
No.
Will Vinton,
yes.
then
big flop.
that can transition into the Laika of it all. Well, because what happened was pretty tragic in terms of his whole trajectory.
Well, so right, because like when he's brought on board, it's Vinton and Phil Knight, of course, Nike founder, had invested in this company, and Travis Knight, obviously former rapper,
of course,
then decides he likes animation.
Yes.
What rapper was he?
Did he have a rap? Do we know?
He did. Look it up. This is the son of Phil Knight.
He's the son of the founder of Nike.
Founder of Nike.
Sure. Well, you were telling me a little bit about this the other day.
Has a record deal. And then finds his true passion.
What? It's worse than
stop motion. It's terrible.
Chili tea.
Chili tea.
It's really bad. It's really, really bad.
Look, if your dad founded Nike, you could pursue your projects. And if you were 20 years old, they might be stupid projects.
And I'll say this. When people hear that the director of Kubo and the Two Strings had a rap career, they're like, that seems improbable. If you watch his music videos, it absolutely feels like who you would imagine directed Kubo and the Two Strings.
Interesting.
Doing rap.
He has music video. Right.
Yes.
Right.
It's not like that's bizarre that guy has the personality of a rapper. It's like, no, it's bizarre that a rapper had the personality of a stop motion animator.
Now, maybe you guys can explain this to me. I'll finish this. In 2002, Knight takes over Vinton Studios and it's renamed Laika in 2005. So what happens to Mr. Vinton?
Great.
Is he put in jail for selling, the saltwater taffy and it made someone sick? He just looks like a saltwater taffy salesman. He's got a big bushy mustache.
I think there's basically just a kind of complete financial collapse that is largely tied to the rise of CGI. I don't know how much more we can dig into this, but the company was just sort of shrinking and shrinking and shrinking with very high overhead. And, we talked about in the James the Giant Peach episode, so much that movie was, I've spent the time to build up a crew, to build up a studio, to have sound stages. I want to keep them working, right?
Right. We need another project.
It's the thing with these animation studios. Yeah. And he had a big studio. He had a big company, and the work was drying up. And it got worse and worse by the year.
The PJs thing is kind of like, it's like, that was such a big project.
That was supposed to be the thing that would give them another 10 years.
Is producing it, and it doesn't make it a season.
Brian Grazer, Ron Howard. It did 2 seasons.
Why am I saying? Oh, no, sorry. Gary and Mike is the one that did only
Which was a UPN show.
Right.
Which I always liked, by the way.
Never seen that.
Good.
Never heard of it?
Good. But this was the thing. They had a couple big failed projects like that, and they're not getting commercial work anymore. You know?
I can see why this didn't exactly light the world on fire. What about Celebrity Deathmatch? Who did that?
Eric
That's another
Fogel.
claymation
I
thing.
forget what the name of the animation studio was.
I don't remember.
The guy's name was Eric Fogel.
What? And this
Eric Fogel. Yeah.
I want to preface this by saying I don't know the exact details, so I'm hearing this completely secondhand.
Sure.
What I have heard happened with the Will Vinton of it all was that the studio was struggling, and Phil Knight said that he would make an investment.
Yes, his son is at that point.
Yeah, because his son's like,
well,
I love this.
Part
of
the investment was my son has to have a major role here.
Right. His son was just an animator, I believe, at that point.
I don't know the details. I can't.
Right. He was an intern. He would know. Part of the investment literally was hiring him as an intern.
Right.
Gotcha.
And
and then in 2003, when Phil Knight takes over the company, Travis is suddenly on the board of directors.
Well, so that flip happened pretty quickly from what I've heard.
I mean, from the timeline I can guess here is we're talking like 5 years maximum.
Yeah, it was basically it went from like, great, I'll invest in this, but can my son work here? To actually, I'm in charge, and my son is going to be the one that's creatively in charge.
Yes.
But here's what I think is interesting. I think his son ends up being pretty good at
this
what he,
is the whole,
you know what I mean?
It's the whole distressing thing of like, it all sounds so evil.
Yes.
And yet
every part of this should have been
right.
A
and like,
nightmare.
and I've heard stories about like almost, you hear stories about any animation studio.
Yes.
Pixar, Disney, whatever, like where you're like, oh my God, like people are worked to the bone. It's so intense, right? All that stuff. But at the same time, it's like they are pretty much the only people making these kinds of movies, and it is nice to have them.
Yeah.
And Travis Knight has directed 2 films.
Chili
Tea has directed 2 films, one a stop motion film and one a film starring Bumblebee of the Transformers, both of which I thought were pretty good.
Yeah.
Not like masterpieces.
Yeah.
Kubo's pretty good.
close to masterpiece.
Kubo has its problems, but is a so like I don't know what to do about this.
Almost
it's beyond like regular Hollywood nepotism where it's like, oh, it turns out this person's parents are actors. Like, oh,
no, this is
it's the guy's dad like bought him a studio.
I would also say, almost to his credit, you're like, his dad buys him a studio, and then he doesn't direct a movie until they're 4 in.
It was the 4th one, right? Yeah,
you know, it's not
Paranorman,
like,
and then
he
Box
let
Trolls,
other people actually. But yeah, it's a very bizarre story. He does that. He does Bumblebee. He's now directing the next Laika release.
Is he? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
And then he also just signed up to do $6 Million Man.
Great.
With Mark Wahlberg. But
$6 Million Man can barely get you a cup of coffee.
But I think that's also one of the bummers. And I
like my joke?
David's pointing his cup of coffee. Yeah. It's good. I like it.
Yeah.
That's one of the bummers, I will say, though, is that Laika, because I was an animator in college, right?
Yes.
And there was only so many places that you wanted to end up.
Yeah.
Companies.
Yeah.
Because there's not that many animation companies back then. It was like you get hired at Pixar, maybe you go to Disney, and then it was like some people were like, ooh, what about Laika? It's a bummer that sort of like one of the only paths to having sustainable studio for stop motion animation and to be in charge of it
it's like a charitable
is a
thing.
Billionaire has to pay for it. And
well, this is what's so odd about the Vinton Laika situation, right? Is I had it mixed up in my mind that he was already a low-level animator rather than the internship being part of the conditions of Travis Knight investing the money into Phil Knight.
No,
I thought he was already there. Sure. But it was that he was already into stop motion. But I believe as the story goes, it was basically that like Travis went to his dad on hands and knees and was like, stop motion is going to die as an art form if this company is not saved. Someone needs to do it. There is no American government investment into the arts.
A fair point. There's very little, yes.
Where so many, when you watch, like, you look at the best animated short film nominees each year, and it's like you might get one short film that's a Pixar or a Disney because they've started, they've stayed investing in those.
Right.
And otherwise, you're mostly seeing foreign films that come out of countries that have like fucking arts grants and lotteries and funds for this sort of shit for people to work in this medium that is not commercially viable. But it is this thing where it's like, Dad, you have so much fucking money. Can you find the kindness in your heart to save an art form? And then it becomes this hostile takeover that makes a little bit of sense when you're like, not to be cynical and crass about it, but you're like, Vinton's old at this point. He dies in 2018. He had not been able to turn a profit in the company for about a decade at that point. There is the argument that there needs to be fresh blood. When you go, the guy who bought it just installed his son at the top of the food chain within like 18 months of him starting there as an intern. That seems like red alert, but it works. Then he finally takes over as director on the 4th movie. It's really good. Then he takes a jump to doing American live action studio blockbuster.
That's the thing where you're like, well, right, is that
so you're like,
work?
Was he just using this as a leapfrog kind of thing to get to a bigger career?
For him to do a Transformers spinoff.
Right.
But then it was like not a bad movie.
And there was that moment where it's like,
it's not great.
They ended the distribution deal with Focus. Laika signs a new deal with Annapurna. They release Missing Link. Missing Link bombs really hard.
Yeah.
There's no new Laika movie announced on the horizon. That's right after Bumblebee's come out. And everyone's like, is Travis Knight bored with Laika? Is Laika going to be left in the dust? And instead, Travis Knight goes back, invests new money in it, forms new distribution deals, starts doing a new film at Laika, continues to constantly, like, almost directed fucking Uncharted, is now attached to $6 Million Man. Like, will jump in between developing live action films and directing movies for Laika and supporting other films there. It does seem to basically work.
I know, but it's so reading this Wikipedia page, you just want to
everything about this guy. You want to, yes.
I
don't want to strangle Travis Knight. To be clear,
boy, capitalism is great.
I do think capitalism is great. No complaints there.
The only bummer is that Travis Knight's hobby wasn't like mental health advocacy, and instead it was stop motion that is billionaire.
Whatever. Look, it makes people happy.
But it's also one of these things where it's like,
I'm just laughing because at myself, I agree. Where I'm like, oh, thank God someone is trying to keep stop motion alive. But you're also like, God, if like the only way to get anything done is like pull at the like tailcoat of a billionaire and be like, please, sir.
All right, let's get off Travis Knight.
I just need to clarify. It's not like a chili pepper.
No, it's like chili, like cold.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Chili.
Chili Y.
T, not just the letter T.
Look,
T-E-E, like a T-shirt.
Yeah. Snow was hot back then.
Yes.
If you're a white rapper.
Snow was so hot.
It's. I feel like if you're vanilla ice, of course.
Ice Cube, Ice Cube.
David was saying
the weather phenomenon.
I'm like, huh?
Yeah. No, it's like I think if you're a white rapper, you might want to lean into like I'm cold, icy, snowy. Right? Sure. You want to just go that direction, maybe.
Yeah, I guess there's some correlation there.
Coraline.
And
we're back.
The first thing Selick does with this company, whatever,
Moon Girl
is Moon Girl, which I have seen. A little short film.
It's not very good.
It's CG. Yes.
Right. So this is another thing where I'm like, the founder of Nike bought Will Vinton Studios, installed his son, lured Selick over, and now the first thing they're releasing is a CGI short film. And I was like, everything's dying.
This is lame.
Why are they working in CG? Yeah. How is Selick sunk to this low? How embarrassing for everyone involved. When they announced Coraline is happening as a feature in stop motion, I'm like...
You're skeptical just because there's no track record here. Like, why would this...
Everything about it. And the CGI film's shitty. It's one of these things where you're like, this is around the same time that Flushed Away comes out.
Yeah,
and Aardman's
why
been
are
pushed
we
into
doing
CGI.
Fake stop motion?
Yeah.
Like CGI'd stop motion.
Yes. Right. I also remember there was... Because, again, I was in college when this was all happening, and I was an animator who was like, oh, maybe my dream is to work at Laika. I remember their whole thing with the 3D was like they were trying to build a new system that could basically use the principles of stop motion as the method for animating, computer-generated imagery, which it felt like a sort of backwards, but that was their big move, and I sort of...
That was also the era where people were like, "We're minutes away from computers being able to do everything."
Yeah, exactly.
It'll be easy.
But they really pioneered the use of 3D printing in stop motion, which involved doing a lot of pre-animation on computers and then just physicalizing it later.
So that was all context of the fact that then that leads us to Coraline, which is the first Laika release.
Yes.
Which has a lot of attention now on it in the animation world in particular, because it's like, all right, well, let's see.
Is this an embarrassing hobby film?
But it's also, I guess the last stop motion animated feature is probably Wallace and Gromit, right? Was there anything of note in between these two
Wallace
movies?
and Gromit and Corpse Bride come
I was
out
going to say
Corpse Bride's the same year. Right?
Wallace and Gromit underperforms at the box office here in the States, is obviously big overseas.
Did very, very well in Europe,
Chicken Run is still the only stop motion film to pass $100 million domestic. So there was kind of this feeling of like, Aardman had the potential to be the next Pixar. It took them way too long to do a follow-up film. Wallace and Gromit wins the Oscar, is beloved,
was well liked,
underperforms at the box office. DreamWorks drops their deal. Another thing that makes it feel like stop motion's kind of dying. Tim Burton was able to bring it back.
Did well,
Corpse Bride did well, got an Oscar nomination, got good reviews, but it sort of feels like maybe stop motion only gets made at a studio level if Tim Burton works it into his contract.
Well, the Corpse Bride thing, which we talked about on the Corpse Bride episode, I believe, was that people didn't realize it was stop motion.
Yes.
Because they did so much cleanup and they did such a good job.
Yeah, it looks too clean. We talked about this long ago.
But I don't remember if we talked about this, but it's like the contracts for Charlie and the Chocolate Factory and Corpse Bride are done together at Warner Brothers. It's basically a one for me, one for you. And the same thing happens again with Alice in Wonderland and Frankenweenie. It's like when Tim Burton wants to, they'll let him make a stop motion movie as payment for making a bigger studio live action film.
So here's a question that I've always had about Henry Selick and Tim Burton. Their styles that they become known for are so close to each other that I'm always curious in a chicken and egg sense if that's why they came together. Because I think they met in college.
Yeah.
Yes.
If that's why they found each other, because they're like,
Probably
we like to make these sort of macabre, But it's so interesting because when you think of, I mean, obviously the Tim Burton of it all with Night Before Christmas, people attribute that style to him. But if you see Tim Burton's own illustrations, it is that style of these.
He's making puppet versions of Tim Burton's illustrations, right?
And this interesting thing we've talked about, that every one of Selick's films has a different primary designer.
Yes.
He will pick someone with a very distinct illustration style and model the entire film in their vision. We have not seen a Selick movie that is like his personal art style, quote unquote. Because the first one he's doing Burton, then he's doing Lane Smith. The name of the illustrator on this film, I forget, it's a Japanese illustrator.
Yes, I have it somewhere. But
Tadahiro Yuseki.
Right. And then on Wendell and Wild, it's the New Yorker guy.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm forgetting his name. We'll talk about it next episode. No.
Well, William Shawn.
No, he's the modern New
David
Yorker
Renwick.
guy who does like the little portraits for profiles and things like that.
Sure, right.
And a lot of the movie
Sicilian.
review images.
Right.
Whatever.
But they all tend towards this extremely disproportioned,
Big heads.
stick thin, big heads,
But
which is
that's also easy for stop motion, right? Like,
But,
Is
but
it?
David,
because a big head you can like change.
yes. But
the
I'm saying
faces.
the proportions are not easy because it's like the characters cannot support
I think
themselves.
you think
at
of
all.
that being
right.
natural because the two of them
Yes.
have made that the sort of status quo. If you look at Will Vinton and you look at Arteman, they're very stubby.
Yeah.
Right.
They're
Usually,
thick,
usually of
they're
these
chunky.
big based characters that sort of waddle.
Same with Gumby. Like you just kind of have these characters who are lumpy.
Well, don't body shame Gumby. I mean, that's how the guy was born. I mean,
They look healthy.
Yeah, Gumby's very healthy.
It's muscle mass.
That's interesting. Sure. So it's like annoying to deal with these things.
Well, it's they're
they're
so
It's not a
They're
natural choice.
spindly.
the legs will snap. You know what I mean? It's like,
But like, I guess it's like you can have such sort of expressive movements.
yes. Well, that's what makes.
with
I
these
think
limbs.
that's part of what makes them stick in the zeitgeist is
Right.
that they are
Yes.
so expressive because they are so disproportionate, because their armature is basically like barely covered in
Right.
plasticine or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, it's a thing I feel so strongly watching this movie where anytime a new character is introduced, you're like, fuck, I can't wait to see how this person moves.
Yeah, right. I mean, especially in this movie with the
Yes.
with the neighbors and all
Yeah.
that. Okay, a little bit more. Moon Girl he makes, right? The whole thing is that Knight moves fucking Vinton to Oregon. 'Cause
Yes.
this is where Laika
Right.
is
Yes.
based.
Right.
And that's where Phil Knight. Phil Knight is Mr. Oregon.
Yeah.
They ask him to do or he has Coraline. They're like, bring Coraline.
Yeah.
We'll start work on Coraline. And then they're going to back out. And I'll say Selick gives Travis Knight credit, calls him one of the best animators in the world, says that he worked on Moon Girl, and basically went to Phil Knight and was like, we cannot block this project. This must happen.
Yeah.
Like, so apparently, Selick says Coraline was in trouble for being quote unquote too dark, up at Laika, and Travis Knight was the one who got it over the line.
But you also
so
think
that's cool.
Travis Knight has to know if we're building an animation.
This is fucking
studio,
Henry Selick.
This is the number one guy
Yeah.
we want in our stable.
And
And it very much feels like so much of the formation of Laika is if we can get Selick here, he can be our Lasseter. We can build this whole place around him.
Selick told the LA Times in 2005 that his plan with Coraline was to do the real world as CG and the magic world as stop motion. They were
Wow.
considering using CG
Yeah.
for the animation of this
Yeah.
film. Glad they didn't.
Yes.
I mean, I get the idea of the two
Yeah.
world, that's
Yeah.
fun, but still. Bill Mechanic thought stop motion was passe. It's a fucking thing in animation.
I know.
Where they're like, boring, beautiful stop motion or beautiful hand drawn, passe. Why can't it be showy, But they didn't really like how the CG looked in whatever test they were
Moon
doing.
Girl looks shitty.
Yeah, it does.
My
yes.
friend had a term recently. I was talking to him. He was talking about, I won't name him for the reasons I'll be clear as I tell this story. He was talking about he and his wife are in the stage where they're debating whether or not they want to have a child. And he was confessing to me over several rounds of drinks. One of the things that gives him trepidation about having a child is having to watch children's bullshit with the kid, where he's just like,
bad
shit
TV.
my friends who have kids, my brothers,
Sure.
their kids have to watch. It's so fucking dispiriting. And he said every character just looks like a shampoo bottle now. And
funny.
it's such a good descriptor of this sort of blandness of so much CGI character
The
design.
roundedness, the
Yeah.
boring colors.
Looks like a shampoo bottle. And like Moon Girl is one of those things where you're like, this looks like shampoo bottles.
But of course, what's the thing they settle on is like, okay, if we're not going to use CG, what can we use? 3D. 3D, three-dimensional photography.
This
They've
movie-
done it on Nightmare.
Yeah.
So that's the
I think we didn't really talk about that much in that episode.
I think we mentioned
they do the 3D re-release that starts making like $10 million each year. This is the beginning of Disney starting to invest in 3D. Something like Chicken Little will come out and they'll put it on like 40 3D screens. But it's starting to grow. Everyone knows that Avatar's in the pipeline. And they're working towards that, which everyone assumes is going to be the total threshold breakthrough moment. But this film comes out 9 months before Avatar.
It sure does.
It's a real important film in.
I am certain
3D
it is the first 3D movie I saw that was not like a movie about asteroids I saw at the Natural History Museum or whatever with like red green.
Right.
Like I think it's the first movie that I wore those real 3D, real D
the
polarized
Rodriguez
glasses.
3D movies are red and blue polarized. And
I didn't see I didn't see Beowulf.
What's it?
I don't
fucking sick. What's it called?
What? Anaglyph.
Anaglyph.
Oh yeah. Right.
The red and blue is Anaglyph.
Yeah, but I didn't see Beowulf because Beowulf is before this, right?
Yeah, but all these things. No, it is.
Right?
It is. But all these things had like semi-limited releases. Yeah, I mean, I'm such a fiend for 3D that I would go anytime. Meet the Robinsons, I think, had a limited.
I remember
release,
when I saw this in 3D, it was like, oh, how funny! Look at these little glasses.
This was a big deal. This was like, this is really kind of announcing this as a medium.
Yeah, and we can take a little walk through the history of 3D. In that we don't have to go deep.
Little walk.
We'll do a little baby walk.
Yeah.
We should stay seated though.
We'll stay seated.
Yeah, okay.
We're not gonna. Yeah. This is not
actually.
Well,
walk around the room.
So obviously, like, it was like 80s through the early 2000s.
Mm-hmm.
It was all of what you're talking about, David. Right? Where it's like amusement park.
Yeah, you go to the Natural History Museum. You go to Disney World.
Giant headsets,
Yes.
IMAX 3D
And
documentaries that are 45 minutes long.
Everest.
They had red blue or like
no, you're
lens
right. I
stuff.
saw some IMAX thing about a postal delivery man in
But they were
Alaska.
like headsets.
Yeah, you would wear
and the
these
movies were
giant
under an
goggles,
hour.
Right.
Yeah, so there's we can talk about that a little bit later when we talk about 3D. But this after around 2003, 2004 is when studios and theaters started going, maybe 3D is the next big thing. And the issue was that people were not shooting 3D films. They were taking films and converting them to 3D.
Right.
And back then the technology was, so now when they convert movies to 3D, they will create actual sort of like 3D elements that things are sort of like fake projected onto so that it has a three-dimensional depth to it. Whereas back then,
basically CGI animate a movie with the same shapes as the live action footage and then wrap the live action footage around those shapes.
Yeah, theoretically.
Right.
What they were doing
oversimplified, but
in the early mid 2000s is it was everyone referred to as paper cutout.
Right.
Where it would just be like, great, this 2D plane is farther ahead than that 2D plane.
It looks like a pop-up book. You can everything is flat, but you can create
when you
layers
take your glasses
of where
off,
those
you
flat
see it. It
things
looks
are in
funny.
relation
It's
to
I'm
each
seeing
other.
double here, 4 Krusties.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And so it wasn't very good. There was a few things that were shot natively 3D, but I think Coraline was for a lot of people the first film, and we can get into it in a little bit about what they did technologically that was so impressive. But it was one of the first films that was shot natively 3D, and they did it so well
with actual cameras because it's stop motion.
Right.
So many of the 3D digital 3D movies that were coming out in these experimental years were CGI films because they were easy to post convert because you're just modifying the files that already exist in the computer. And then there'd be a thing where like Superman Returns, when it played in IMAX, there were like 2 sequences that were 3D where they'd flash the symbol. They test the waters a little bit.
Right.
But this is like, in terms of a film that was actually shot with cameras, intentionally designed for 3D, this was a humongous step in the modern era.
Because it also had to coincide with the proliferation of digital cinema, right? So 3D, if you're shooting something 3D, for those of you who are not in the know, you basically have to have one camera for each eye. Because if you like hold your hand in front of your face, you know, as if you're doing a eye poke blocker, and you go back and forth between your left eye and right eye, right? Your eyes are seeing different views of things. And so when you're shooting 3D, the whole thing that makes it 3D is that you're having these 2 views that your brain is processing into one image. You have to have 2 cameras that are next to each other. And theoretically, they have to be next to each other at the exact distance that the human eyes are typically apart. That's what creates depth. Now, with film cameras, that's really hard because you've got these big, bulky cameras that require film and need to be super precise and they need to be completely in sync because you can't, you can't have them off temporarily even a little bit because that's going to create this weird dissonance.
It's twice as loud. It's harder to do camera movements. All these things become incredibly complicated. Yeah.
And so digital cinema means that now you're dealing with a digital processors, which means cameras start getting a little bit smaller, a little bit easier to deal with, and you can sync stuff up digitally. So you're not trying to have things be mechanically synced. You can digitally sync them, which is a lot easier and better for 3D. But the rigs are still ginormous. And they don't exist. There is not enough flow of money or time for it to be something where people are creating really easy solutions for this stuff. So the only films that can really do this, like shoot natively in 3D, are the avatars of the world that are investing all this money into new, huge budget technology. And
James Cameron literally went to Fox and went, I don't know if this movie's doable. Will you give me 2 years and $5 million to do some R&D and maybe I'll have a film? I don't know.
Exactly. And so Coraline just happens to be right place, right time to make good use of some of this technology in a really interesting way.
A lot of the stuff that Cameron sort of field tested on the documentaries that he did in this period. A thing about the use of 3D in this movie. As a child, I used to always think that Wizard of Oz had to be the first use of color in film because it feels so poetic and
when
perfect.
It comes in, when the thing comes into color, you're like, oh my God, no one had ever seen this on a screen before.
You just want to believe that was the introduction of color because it feels like, well, this is the moment where a world opens up, even though color had existed for a decade plus at that point in films, right?
Well, and also there's like those weird like
hand tinting and all this
stuff.
I similarly feel JJ keeps on in all the dossiers, you know, in his very JJ way of his very quiet sort of editorializing that only we read, talking about how much Wizard of Oz comes up with Selick.
Yeah.
Whether by his own admission or other people's, because of the whole thing we're talking about of the imagining another world, another place, another dimension, you know, these sort of alternate realities, what have you. Saying to Selick, you get to use 3D now. You now have a tool that is kind of equivalent to being able to open the door into the world of color in Wizard of Oz. It's one of the reasons that I argue this is the best application of 3D because it's so tied to the narrative, obviously. And Avatar also has this thing, obviously, where it's a guy entering a different world.
Yeah, right.
But, and Avatar is so experiential and like incredibly well executed. But so much of the technique that Selick uses here to make the 3D thematic, to truly use depth as a very deliberate, pointed storytelling tool, rather than just like immersion.
Yeah.
Or have stuff jump out at you. It's kind of insane that he nailed it this hard when so much of what he was doing was basically uncharted territory and figuring it out as they went along.
Yeah. And so that sort of leads to my feeling, which is I think this is, in my experience of watching movies, the best, most fulfilling as an audience member use of stereoscopic film that I have seen. Ben, like, I know you watched this for the first time.
Right, you're not seeing it in 3D.
You did, so you didn't see it in 3D.
No.
We should talk at some point about how this was also tied in with the 3D television craze, which was a whole interesting universe. But we can leave that for later.
No, we're going to talk about that. Okay. We're going to talk about that.
We don't have to talk about it.
No.
Okay, talk about it. Don't worry about it. We'll get about it.
What's our running time right now?
An hour 20.
Yeah, exactly.
We're recording 2 episodes today.
This is part 1 of the Coraline episode.
Yeah. It might be 3 episodes.
An element that you didn't get to see, which actually makes this film a good film that I like, to a film that I think is incredible and a film that like I hold in this very high esteem, is what they do with stereoscopic imaging. So we've talked here about like Billy Lynn and everything that's happened there, and how Ang Lee is one of the people that really thinks about this in a creative sense as part of the medium. I would say that there's a lot, James Cameron does too, but I would say there's a lot of filmmakers that 3D to the studio is just an added thing to add to ticket sales.
It's just an extra $5 they can charge you.
Yeah. And so they shoot their film exactly how they'd normally shoot their film. Don't do anything to really, maybe they'll have 1 or 2 little things that play with, something's like, you know, passes in front of the screen or whatever.
Even people who do it skillfully, immersion is usually the beginning and the end of the thinking, right? Like Scorsese will have a couple moments that are very clearly, explicitly designed for 3D.
Yeah.
He's certainly conscious of it in the framing of every shot and something like Hugo, but it's also like not tied to story in the same sense.
I do remember Hugo using it quite nicely.
Hugo uses it well.
Yeah.
Like Dark of the Moon uses it well. You know, there are other...
Dark of the Moon uses it really well. Yeah.
But I will say this, not only from a story perspective, but again, stop motion ends up being the one place where you can actually explore everything that stereoscopic has to offer.
Yes.
So something that I think is fascinating, and that's why I was sort of talking about the camera side of things, which I won't go too much deeper into it, but in the past for stop motion, obviously they would use film cameras in the past, which was its own complicated thing. You know, you take a frame, move your puppets, take a frame. It's this long, arduous process.
Literally don't know if it's working or not until you get the footage back developed from the lab.
Yeah, well, they'd have things called lunch boxes or things like that that would allow you to see previews of it. But it was hard. Digital cinema comes along and makes it a lot easier because you can see your frames as they're happening.
Yeah.
Corpse Bride, for example, is shot on like a Canon 1D, like a consumer grade camera.
Yeah.
Like that people probably have. And they had to create all this technology to try to get it to work and operate, but it was a little clunky. So in Coraline, what they ended up doing is they used a machine imaging camera, the type of camera that you would use like in like a factory setting. What that allowed them to do was program the camera super specifically. So the reason I was talking about this two camera thing is that when you're shooting live action elements with two cameras to get stereoscopic, one of the biggest early hurdles is cameras have lenses, which is the glass stuff that makes the light look cool. You know,
we know from lenses.
Great,
sure.
we know what lenses
We've discussed them with you.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
So stereoscopic, if those lenses don't match,
getting over a head cold.
I'm honk there. Yeah.
Holding that one in for like 15
honk
minutes.
for stereoscopic.
Honk shoe.
Everybody, if you're in a car right now, give a quick honk to stereoscopic. So one of the big
new
issues.
Blanket thing, Kit.
Yeah, if you're in a car and you're listening to this episode, give a quick for
We should make
stereoscopic.
honk if you love stereoscopic bumper stickers.
Actually, because I do feel like people don't or whatever.
Okay, so you have a camera for each eye.
Some listeners
right?
might not understand. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So lenses, I think we think of as these finite objects that are just like, you know, always perfect. Lenses are really imperfect things because it's glass elements, right? So lenses have a lot of these issues that can come about them that are unique to those lenses that you have to test in films usually to see if your lenses match just generally between shots, let alone stereoscopic. Those are things like chromatic aberration, where that's when your different color wavelengths don't focus at the same place. So that's when you get like this sort of edge coloring on weird lighted objects. You have like spherical distortion and aberration, which is like all these little things that make lenses unique, which is why also cinematographers will search out for lenses that have the perfect balance of all of these things. And it's not something you can really plan for. You just have to, each lens is going to have its own quality. But when you're shooting stereoscopic, right, each of those lenses represents one of your eyes. So if any of those lenses are different, it creates these weird effects that don't quite line up exactly. And that's when stuff starts, because again, imagine if your eyes were seeing images that were even more different than they already are. You'd start to get it'd take you a minute to adjust. Well, we already have that with our eyes. Now add lenses to the mix. If the lenses of a 3D film are different, it's starting to create this weird thing. And Ang Lee talked about it so much, and Billy Lin we talked about is they had to search far and wide for lenses that were as close as humanly possible because any differences between the lenses would cause all these huge images. Well, stop motion.
Talk about 3D giving them headaches. It's because of not exclusively, but so often these sort of discrepancies will cause your brain to have to work overtime.
Right. Well, also think of this. If the cameras are off timing at all, that means the two images being processed in each eye when you're watching it are slightly different.
Yeah.
And that's the stuff that creates these headaches and that makes you feel sick is you're like, oh, this is like, the images aren't exactly the same. Something's messed up. And you can't sense it. You just feel sick.
Right.
With stop motion, your subject isn't moving, right? Obviously, you're taking still photos of it. You don't need two cameras. So what they did is they took one camera, would take a photo.
This already sounds stressful.
This rules.
Move it over.
And then move it over.
Yeah.
And take another photo.
Yeah.
Now, what's even more interesting about this is that normally when you are doing stereoscopic, you have to get those lenses really close to be the distance between human eyes. You know what I mean? And a lot of times what you end up doing is you use these mirror deflection plates that basically use mirrors to shoot the images into the two different eyes so they can be much closer. Now you're dealing with another element of glass, which is mirrors, which is going to take down some of your brightness. It creates all these issues.
Sure.
They're not having to do that. They're able to create that distance with the camera. And beyond that, a thing that they do that I think is fascinating, that makes this absolutely brilliant. Instead of having the cameras the distance of human eyes, they have their cameras separated by the distance of the puppet eyes. So that your three-dimensional perspective in the sets is not that from a normal-sized person looking at these miniatures, but from the three-dimensional perspective of someone who is of that size.
I have a couple notes for you.
Yeah.
Notes or questions?
Notes. One, you said the puppets don't move. They do. When everyone leaves and goes home and turns out the lights, the puppets come to life and they move around. Just FYI. They have
Did you
parties.
see the after credits thing and Wendell Watt?
Yeah.
Wait until you see this.
Right.
Two, that's all very interesting, but James Cameron went to Pandora and filmed a whole movie there. That was pretty difficult. You had to wear a gas mask and all that.
Yes.
So give him some credit.
And work visas were a fucking nightmare on that movie.
Horrible.
For
You
the whole
got to deal
crew.
with, I don't even know what the company's called in Avatar or whatever they are.
Yeah.
Anyway,
But the
that's
Navi
very
workers
interesting.
unionized eventually, which I thought was really
It was
good.
good.
No,
It
I
was good.
support them, obviously.
Yeah.
Like I think they should be, given. I don't even know what Navi currency is. They should be given as many
AWA bucks.
bows and arrows as they like. Yeah, AWA bucks. Great. Yeah, I'm sure they love that. No,
And every 4 hours they have to stop to put their head
right. They got to recharge
things into
I
a
don't know how Navis
whatever.
Union mandated ponytail break.
No, that's very interesting. So are puppet eyes further apart on their heads, or is it they're much
Well, it
closer
depends on the
together
design of the
because they're
character.
tiny?
They're tiny, so they're much closer. The
Right,
difference between
yeah.
the two, the left and right movement of the camera.
Right.
And that's also why they're using, what's so funny is like if you are a film nerd and you're looking up movies, you sort of like to look up like what cameras they're using and what lens system and like, oh, is this, did they use Zeiss or Angenieux or this or that, or this is a Panavision movie? For this, the camera they used was the Mega Plus EC 11,000 color CCD machine vision camera.
Yeah. I've got one of those.
Like this is like essentially like a Ford factory line camera.
Yes, but it's
like at a car manufacturing.
Yeah, it's like
probably
it's probably used to like, I don't know, like make like microchips or
Sure.
something. But they could program it super intricately, and obviously the movement of the camera is being done robotically.
Yeah,
so they can have it be tiny.
Oh, it's not just some guy who's like, I don't know, what is this, 2 inches?
But that's how they would do it
Back
before
in the day,
that.
I'm sure, right?
Like Corpse Bride, they shot it on a 1D. Like that's a thing you have to like. It's like your dad has a 1D to shoot pigeons in the park.
It's like a sub iPhone camera now.
Yeah, it's like so. I just think it's fascinating. And then the thing that Ben, I'm curious if you picked up on watching it for the first time, 2D, is that they do something fascinating that again you cannot do in any other thing except for stop motion.
This is the argument,
which I think is just like
this
beautiful.
is not an argument. I'm not interested in an argument.
Winning.
Finn, come on.
No, David knows this movie's
I
beautiful.
love this movie to death.
Then you're right. It's not an argument because we've won.
Finish your point.
Griffin
please.
just wants you to take back that you call us dumb animation nerds like 8 years ago.
You
I think.
are dumb animation nerds. Nothing about this
What in this
podcast
episode
is
supports that idea?
Yeah. What are you talking? We're not dumb.
Have you not heard of Bill Vinton? Then you look up a man who looks like a Mario villain.
Smart special animation boys.
Also, just
He
to be
created
clear,
the California raisins. God damn it! Show some respect.
Also, to be crystal
look like
clear, I have a lot of respect for the
Wario's
man.
Will
Right,
Vinton does not look like a Mario villain. He looks exactly like Sonic's villain.
He looks like
exactly
You're right.
like
Right. He
actually
looks
does
like
look-
he looks more like Eggman.
He looks like a Coney Island strongman. I respect the guy. Like, I like that was what that guy looked like. It's good. It's just funny when you guys are like, haven't you heard of this guy? And I Google. Anyway.
I like David's over at Will Vinton Studios trying to get him to tear a phone book open.
Right, exactly. Like, come on, take this mallet. Let's see who can ring a higher bell.
Oh man.
Oh,
okay,
boy.
so
Ben, question for Ben.
yes,
Sorry, no, you were doing.
I was doing the build up.
Yes.
So Ben, I don't know if you noticed this, but what they did in Coraline, because Henry Selick creators and all the people were like, we want to create this dissonance between the real world and the other world.
Right. There's got to be a shift.
We want the other world to feel magnificent to Coraline when she first arrives.
And you got this redefined medium now at your disposal.
So I noticed it only because I know, but you might not have even not noticed it watching it in 2D, is that all of the sets in the real world are tilted at an angle, like the floor and the walls, so that they can be flatter, so that there's very little depth to them.
Okay.
So that like the room is actually, instead of being long, is really short, and it's a perspective trick. So that like they're animating these characters not on a flat ground, but on a angled ground to make it all collapse in.
It's basically like all the live action sets in James and the Giant Peach. They're using forced perspective to essentially make sets that are closer to cutout pop-up books.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And doing tricks with the physical animation of the characters to make it look like they're existing in a normally proportioned room. But the effect is they're shooting a space that is close to flat.
So that there's not as much depth and that everything feels more tight. So that when she goes to the other world, suddenly they do the opposite.
That fucking moment in a theater, if you can imagine, when she opens the door and the tunnel extends all the way out.
Oh my gosh.
It truly feels like you are looking into an infinite void. I remember I saw this movie like 3 times in theaters.
Yeah.
Because it was just like, well, who knows if I'm ever going to be able to watch 3D again in any other form, you know? And every time that first unfolding is just gasps from the audience where they're like, holy shit, this is possible. And I think it's interesting that rewatching it, and I rewatched it flat, I will say, for this episode, because I want to be able to judge it on merits.
Yeah.
Knowing how most people will end up rewatching this. In the first 15 minutes of the movie, he does a lot of shit coming out at the screen at you tricks.
Yes.
Yeah.
He gets those out of the system. He understands that there's going to be a novelty factor that everyone enjoys.
Right. People have glasses on. They want to understand why.
The first image of the movie is the needle poking through the button, right?
Yeah.
And that shit pokes all the way fucking out. It's like theme park movie, like, holy shit, this is attacking me. The introduction of YB is him riding the bike right into frame.
And then isn't it like workers carrying a rug or something?
All of this shit. He's doing all of that. And then like minute 15, the tunnel unfurls and he's like, no, this is about depth. It's not about me throwing things out at you. It's about pulling you deeper and deeper in.
I remember both with this and
the whole
Avatar,
language changes of the movie.
Like that, right? Like I thought, because there was that My Bloody Valentine movie. Right? There were a few horror movies that had done the kind of like a pickaxe flies at your face thing. And it was this and Avatar where I was like, oh, I see. It's like that the world has texture. I've never seen that deployed. That makes so much more sense. Or that seems like a less gimmicky use of the technology.
The sets when you go into the other world are so fucking deep. It's the exact opposite.
It's so cool with stop motion that the sets are they're sets. These are things.
Right.
You know,
But it's the exact opposite of what JD was talking about with the opening sets, where the sets are then humongous.
Yeah.
When he's shooting this stereoscopically, you're feeling the empty space around them. You know? So the shift, and I still think it works visually watching the film flat.
Yeah.
He uses obviously the color palettes and the contrast between the two worlds. That still works flat. But even I think visually, you do sense how much more claustrophobic the rooms feel in the beginning.
Mm-hmm. And obviously, he desaturates the color a little bit. You know, he does other stuff too to make
Coraline
it feel lame.
is basically the only character in her world at the beginning who has color. Everyone else is desaturated, is muted, is earthy. She's got a bright yellow raincoat and bright blue hair, and then she goes into a world where suddenly everything has as much color as she does, but also she can finally fucking breathe, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I really didn't pick up on it though.
Yeah. And that's that. I think that's what's so is it when it's 2D, you don't know.
David?
Yes?
I just want to talk about how the new year doesn't mean the end of the holiday rush. That's all I want to talk about.
I mean, I know. The second I walk in the door, you bark at me. The new year doesn't have to be the end of the holiday rush.
Listen, David, I'm just a host ad-libbing, and what I'm ad-libbing about is how it's a great time to set up for a year of success, 2023, year of success, hashtag year of success, by saving money and being more efficient. You know the best way to do that? Stamps.com.
They've teamed up with the post office to get you huge mailing and shipping discounts, up to 86% off. Look, because it's January.
Yeah.
You got returns,
customer
gift card
emails,
purchases.
the inevitable increase in postage costs.
Look, you can print your own postage right at home or in the office within minutes of signing up at Stamps.com. You never stress about finding the fastest and cheapest shipping solutions. Stamps.com does it all for you automatically.
It's a New Year no-brainer for your small business.
They've got amazing partnerships with the USPS and UPS. They got unbeatable rates, up to 86% off. So that's really cool. Indispensable for over 1 million businesses for more than 20 years. Okay?
David, I am dying to motivate our audience. And, Film Twitter loves to talk about elevated horror.
Yes.
But Stamps.com likes to talk about elevated post office.
Yes. And the thing about it is it's very well put. It's kind of an elevated post office.
It says that in the ad copy.
Yeah, it definitely does say the post office, comma, elevated. Look, all you need is a computer and a printer. They even send you a free scale.
Free.
It's free.
You can use that for anything you want.
If you need a package pickup, you can schedule it through your dashboard at Stamps.com. Sell products online. They seamlessly connect with every major marketplace and shopping cart.
Yep.
Start the new year by saving serious money on mailing and shipping. Get started with Stamps.com today. Sign up with promo code CHECK for a special offer that includes a 4-week trial, plus free postage and a free digital scale. No long-term commitments or contracts. Just go to Stamps.com, click the microphone at the top of the page, and enter code CHECK.
I love that you still got to click the microphone at the top of the page.
I do too.
Takes
me back to Just Coffee and all the old classics.
Yeah.
Would you say, though, with the 2D version, there is this sort of noticeable visual quality that's just slightly off, and I can't really encapsulate what I'm seeing. The best I could explain it is it feels almost like the movie is choppy or buffering.
Okay,
kind of.
So yes,
does that make sense?
Were you watching it on your phone without Wi-Fi as well? Was that a problem?
I was outside of the McDonald's,
right, and just kind of.
So one of the things that I won't say more than this is that I know a group of I'll say a handful of people that worked on Coraline or adjacent to Coraline, and so they have been a little bit of my resource. Especially for this episode of trying to sort of reach out and be like, hey, what was this? So one of the things last night as I was watching that I was texting about was I was like noticing that exact thing where I was like, so in animation, you can animate on what's called 1s, 2s, 3s, 4s. Yes, that's every frame.
We've talked about this. Right. Well, yeah.
So stop motion, you're always going to animate on 1s.
Right.
Just because like you're doing all this work, just animate on 1s.
Yeah.
It's hand-drawn animation ends up doing more like 2s and stuff like that because it's more work to do a frame versus in stop motion. You're like, I'm here anyways. I'll just do the extra movement for whatever.
Hand drawn, you're going to have to redraw the entire thing versus stop motion. You're making one adjustment.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But there's moments in Coraline where I was like, oh, it looks like that's on like 2s or 3s. Like what's going on there?
Yeah.
So there's some things that are purposely chosen for that. So like all the ghosts are animated in like 4s.
Yes.
Like as
and
a
there's CG
choice.
creations in
They're
some. No, okay. Dossier disagrees with you, but okay. Go on.
I believe that they are computer composited, but I don't believe that they are CG unless I have.
Apparently, there is one fully CG sequence, which is the ghost children coming into her dream to warm her.
Oh, interesting.
He says the backgrounds there are pure CG.
Because Paranorman has a CGI ghost, and it's a lot more apparent. Like they choose to make almost all of the ghosts in that CG. And you can tell that it's CG approximating. Whereas here it does feel like CGI effects applied to actual
They do some CG cleanup too.
Animation.
Yes, so in Coraline what they did is they did a lot of computer compositing of as many live action elements as possible. Maybe that is one CG sequence, but
that's the only fully
got
CG.
It. The rule of thumb for Selick on this, from what I've gleaned, was everything has to have at least some sort of piece of live action, not live action, but like real, actual.
Something has to be happening in front of a lens.
Something has to be photographed at some point.
Yeah.
And so what you're noticing there, Ben, I was like, why is that happening from time to time? I was texting with a person that was like, and what I think is going on is that's artifacts from digital time remapping that they would do.
Interesting.
So basically, when you are doing stop motion in a movie like this, right, they have like every shot being animated like somewhat simultaneously, just because it takes so much time. So they'll have like 30 stages going at once where a bunch of stuff is happening. And so you can't really go back and do retakes if you get into post somewhere and you're like, I don't really like that. But what you can do is you can digitally remove frames or lengthen frames or blend frames together to tweak the timing if there's something that's a little off. So there's a handful of times where I noticed that in shots, and I think that was because they did some digital time remapping for the animation. But I noticed exactly what you're talking about, where there's moments where you're like, oh, it looks choppy, but it created this interest. They did it in a way where it does feel very tactile, though.
Now, can I throw out a couple other points while we're in this area? With stop motion, you're either doing face replacement or you're creating a puppet with an animated face, right? Or a manipulable face, right? So, for example, like in Nightmare, Jack Skellington is all head replacement, right? He has these extreme expressions. You can see the behind the scenes photos where they just have like a shelf of 1,000 Jack Skellington facial expressions, but also every in-between mouth shape for any type of word he would need to say and all of that, which used to just have to be crafted by hand with people sort of figuring out these are the transitional stages we'd need and all of that. A character in Nightmare like Dr. Finkelstein or Oogie Boogie have these wide mouths with bigger lips, and those are puppets where they're actually just animating the lips movement with one set model rather than pulling off a head, replacing it with a new head, new head, new head, new head, new head. A big thing that Laika pioneered was using 3D printing so that they could animate, and this is particularly helpful with lip sync if you're doing dialogue and things have to be incredibly precise in their timing, that you can record the audio with the actors, then you can animate just the facial expressions on a computer, and then it can print out sequentially the individual framed faces. So it gives them a lot more flexibility in that area.
I think also the puppet, you could pull pieces of the face off and change
it.
They
did top and bottom.
Right, so it's a little less intense.
There's a slit that essentially runs across the eyes.
Yeah.
And it's two pieces that they can pull off and replace and combine in different ways. And this movie, by and large, with the exception of, I noticed one or two, Babinski maybe feels like they kept them in, they'll digitally remove the seam lines. Now, because we just saw Wendell and Wild 2 days ago, and then I was digging into interviews with Selick, in that movie, they keep the seam line on the face.
Yeah.
Right? And that's
I think is the move.
And he said it's because he feels like so many of the things that Laika pioneered in this film that they've now pushed further in their following films and have been adopted by the medium at large and the industries at large, have made stop motion too smooth, too clean.
Right. It almost looks like computer generated.
Too much digital touch up, too much exacting sort of polish, that he was like, on Wendell and Wild, I'm going to keep all the seams on their faces for every character, and Wendell and Wild was animated on 2s.
Interesting.
He was like, I want it to be herky-jerkier. I wonder to some degree, and I believe everything you're saying, GD, but I also wonder to some degree, A, how much some of the herky-jerkiness comes out of growing pains of the 3D face printing, and which 3D printing itself is in a much different state at that point in time than we are right now in precision, and B, how much Selick wants to continue to own some of the things that remind you that the thing is made by hands. You know, he seems adverse to cleaning up things too much.
Well,
it makes sense.
Which I love, because it makes you think about the fact that this was built.
Well, that's why I think, honestly, in a lot of these movies, those final post-credits moments are like the most breathtaking moments of all of the movies. Where every stop motion movie now, like at the end, you'll see a moment where it includes the animators or the rigs or something.
They pull back the curtain.
Or like that, like the Box Trolls has it where it's like an all-day photo where you see the
time lapse.
Time lapse. There you go.
The
Right.
My takeaway from watching this visually, I'm like, how do people do this?
Yeah.
It's incredible. It looks so beautiful.
Yeah.
Like especially the outside, the surroundings around the house.
Oh my gosh.
The miniatures that they built.
Look, I'm glad they did this for me.
Yeah, this is how
it makes me happy.
Yes.
But I don't know. It seems like a lot of, it's sort of like, oh, you shouldn't have. Like someone makes you a nice meal and you're like, this is too much trouble for me.
One of the details I love, the special edition DVD has all these special features that are making of, and they're worth watching because it blows your mind the work they went into it. One of the things I love is all of their fog effects Fog and fire is in like fog, fire,
water,
wind, steam,
the natural elements.
water.
Yeah.
That's usually stuff that people will be like, we're just going to use CG for this.
Sure,
like,
right.
It's just
Why
going to be
bother?
easier.
Right.
What they did in Coraline is they actually handmade all of their fog assets using actual like smoke machines. So they would shoot on black fabric all these smoke effects to be like, oh, YB moves backwards. So, all right, we'll blow some smoke back there. And then they composited those all in together. It was really, really beautiful. Fire, they hand drew all of the fire and then composited
but
that.
It almost seems like they were like, we did all of that, and maybe we've realized like it might be worth saving the time on some things.
Yeah,
right?
but in a certain way that makes this movie like a real key transition point in the medium.
Yeah.
Here's another insane little factoid. They hire a woman specifically to make all the sweaters and knitwear.
Yes.
Which are truly knit. They're not like fabric sweaters approximating knitting as a pattern. They are actually knit by hand. And the fact is that the knitting needle she had to use to knit the tiny sweaters were the size of human hairs.
Okay, so that's very small.
Just think about
I don't want to do that.
Fine detail you're fucking working in there.
Not her, but the lead wardrobe from Deborah Cook was really amazing too, because they built all of these wardrobes for all of these
these
it's
10-inch
it's
tall
absolutely
characters.
because everyone has multiple clothing chains,
which often doesn't happen. Most stop motion films you watch, characters have one look that persists throughout the entire film. Maybe Jack Skellington has 2 looks, 3 looks.
And there's woman Suzanne Moulton that they hired that did all the hair effects. This is one of the first stop motion films ever where every individual hair was animatable. So they would lay down every single hair and then pair it with wire as well. So that's why if you watch the shots where like Coraline like moves her head and her hair like moves with her, that's so much work.
This is what I'm saying. I'm glad they did it for me. I like it. I appreciate it.
You seem to be getting stressed
It's
out.
stressful. I don't know if you should have done this much work for me.
Well, we know they did it for David because they have a title up front.
For you, David Sims.
Well, they have the title. Actually, they have the title at the end.
It's like the ET ride. Every movie.
They have the title at the end that lets us know it's for David.
Wait.
That's a little joke for the Coraline heads.
It says, for those in the know, jerkwad.
That's good. There you go. You roasted me. I remember someone, I think it was on, I can't, what's the movie where it was like clockwork? I think it's Corpse Bride. There was like kind of clockwork stuff inside.
It's mechanics inside the head.
And I remember reading some interview with an animator where he was like, I would like have nightmares that I was clockwork and of like people's heads opening. And I was just like, I don't know if we should be doing this to people.
Yeah, also that technique was bad.
Right, that was maybe whatever. Yeah. This is the thing. You make so few of these things, it's trial and error on every one of them practically.
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
You're having to invent entire new ways to do stuff.
Right. Like this movie is responding to that movie in which all the characters kind of look Botoxed.
Yeah.
And you can see Selick being like, let's bring faces back in.
I just can't help but think about sneezing when I see this stuff.
Oh, you mean like you just knock Coraline over?
It must be so stressful. You can't, like, a cold season?
Well, so
you can't report for work.
That's part of why they will have oftentimes individual animators working alone. So like it's not like a team, it's like one person doing a sequence because they're just like
that seems stressful too, though, right?
Least room for error, no one's bumping it. It's just like one person. And then if you sneeze, you're just like laying on the ground. Like they're in the behind the scenes featurette, they're like it's like 2 animators working on one sequence with 2 different characters, and they're like, yeah, so our sequence is 7 seconds. And they're like, it'll take us probably like 4.5 weeks to animate it. And you're just like, and then they show the clip and it's like, just like someone being like, here, take some, and you're like.
Not even, it's probably the first half of here.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's wild.
Lordy.
Also, imagine trying to animate to the music.
The music's so lovely in this film.
But imagine stop motion animating to lip sync of music and
Selick makes everything more complicated for himself. He wants as much movement in frame. He wants camera movements. He wants all these things. It's incredible. Okay, so
we got to get into it. We got to talk Babinski. We got to talk
about the opening of this film. Let's talk about the opening of this film. 2007 when Beowulf comes out.
Wait a second. This doesn't have anything to do with it. Okay,
it does.
Yeah, I like it. It's like great. Let's talk about Coraline. Okay, so Beowulf.
2007. Beowulf comes out November 2007. This movie comes out February 2009.
Correct.
So it's about 18 months later, a little under.
they played a trailer for Coraline before Beowulf because they needed to announce, like, call their shot. There are more 3D movies coming. And the trailer before Beowulf, as I remember, was just this opening credit sequence, basically, with some different intertitles. That's all it was, because that was probably all they had animated at that point in time.
Yeah.
And that feeling when it just said, like, and now a sneak preview of a movie coming 2009, and then the first image you see is the needle going through the button.
Right.
It was the most exciting, like, statement, and promise for the future.
And plus, it's like, for nerds like us, it's like Selick's out of jail, baby.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know, like, and like, we're not as plugged into all these projects that are happening. I don't think I knew about this movie.
No.
I think about, I was following it closely.
Yeah.
I think about Ehrlich in our Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon episode.
Busy getting laid.
Ehrlich was busy getting laid?
Probably. Good for him.
What?
Oh, okay.
I don't know.
You were saying you were busy
Yeah,
getting
I
laid?
don't know. It was college, right? I was getting laid. Maybe.
Yeah, I'd had sex like 2 times at this point.
Ehrlich,
Coraline
on which
episode.
episode?
Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon talks about, like, the first title of that movie with the opening strings of the score and being like, has any movie ever proclaimed itself a masterpiece faster?
I'm just doing it.
I
Do you
think
remember? Do you know what I'm
Coraline is
talking
in
about?
that conversation with just, like, the look of the first opening, like Laika Presents, in this sort of, like, stitched tapestry. And the score for this movie is so goddamn good.
It is. It's
Like
lovely.
a chorus of French gibberish children
Bruno
speaking nonsense words.
Coulet is the
Yes.
composer.
And famously, the girl who does the singing girl voice, her name in real life was
Coraline?
Coraline.
That's wild, because considering I've never met anyone with that name.
Yeah. I will also okay. I know we just said we're going to start talking about this.
We're
but
talking about this, the opening sequence, such good mood setting.
yes, for me, I watched Coraline because I went to NYU,
Mhm.
and NYU often has these, like,
Well, Coraline is their mascot. They're
Yes.
the fighting Coraline.
yeah, we're the fighting Coralines. You know, we all have buttons for eyes is what we chant from
Right.
when we're rooting on our football boys.
Right.
So they always have these, like, screenings where it'd be like these director screenings.
Yeah.
There's some, oh man, there's some very funny stories about disaster screenings of people who brought their films to NYU, and it's a bunch of pretentious film kids that are like, actually,
Ripping them to shreds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
so this was one of the first ones. I always feel like I'm not allowed to go to things, so I never go to things. This was the first one that I was like, I'm going to this.
Yeah.
I gotta see this.
Henry Selick was screening Coraline, not for NYU, but at Regal Union Square, but NYU was
Sure,
letting
whatever.
people
Yeah,
go to it.
Yeah.
So it was not out. It was way before it came out.
Yeah.
So there was like maybe only a trailer. So me and all the other animation nerds were like, we have to go to this. Henry Selick was there. He was introing it. And so we're all sitting at Union Square. Those glasses go on. And again, no one has seen this yet. So when it starts, and it's a room with a lot of animation dorks in it, just the energy in the room is electric because people are like, holy shit. Not only is this incredible stop motion that we have not seen
Right.
of this caliber with that sort of Henry Selick quality for a while, but also the stereoscopic nature of it, and also just like, this is going to be cool because it starts with
Yes.
all the titles are hand stitched to start, and then
He's forefronting the handmade quality. Like, this opening sequence is calling your attention to the craft of the way this film was made by showing a tiny model creating something with that level of craft and detail at a tiny scale for them.
that's what I was going to say. It is a
Thematically resonant.
It is Babe
yes.
Ruth
Everything
calling
in
their
this movie is
shot in that
thematically
first
resonant.
thing.
Yeah.
Think about this. It is a stop motion model making a tiny
little
stop
tiny
motion
puppet, yes.
character, making a tinier, as detailed stop motion character. It's like we're starting 2 levels down the rabbit hole and being like, the stop motion character our stop motion character is making is good.
Like, the adage of a movie teaches you how to watch it, that is especially true for good and great films. This sequence is doing that so effectively. It is training your brain to pay attention to the craft of how this film is
Of like
made.
knitting and sewing and
Right.
stitching, being like, hey, we fucking made all this
We
stuff,
made all
you
this.
idiots.
You need to appreciate this. But
It
it's
is weird
also
that it
like,
says idiots, though.
Yeah,
Like, someone
it's weird.
says
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
He keeps showing up.
yells it.
The animation stops and Henry Selick walks on screen. Is like,
Idiots, listen.
fucking morons. JD's doing Henry Selick posture.
As you can see.
that's a thing that I wanted to talk about at some point. Is that so after that screening,
Yeah.
I went up and shook Henry Selick's hand,
Sure.
and was like, it's so nice to, and he was like, why, thank you very much. And it was the first time that I realized that he walked and moves
a Henry Selick
like a character.
Yeah.
And then from that point forward, I've had this theory that, not theory, it's just obvious. Animators' characters all move like the animator because they came up looking in a mirror at their own movement to try to figure out how to animate. So like my favorite is if you look at a Nick Park interview, he has the same smile as Wallace, and
he does the hand.
He does the hand. He'll be like, I was so excited, and he'll bring the hand. It's like, and so every animator, if you watch an interview with them, you will see their character, come to life within them, and it's absolutely hilarious and wonderful. And when Will Vinton is, kidnapping a damsel,
right,
and lifting him over his head with one hand, it looks exactly like a California raisin.
Another thing this movie has to do in terms of teaching you how to watch it in this opening sequence is get you used to 3D, knowing that this is going to be the first exposure for a lot of audiences. And so he's doing more of the in-your-face kind of tricks in this close-up photography. But I mean, David, we saw Avatar again recently.
So good.
Re-released in 4DX.
Yes.
Fucking killer film.
Yep.
But it finally jumped out to me how much, especially in the first 20, 30 minutes of that movie before Jake goes into the
really deep in Pandora
Navi body, how much Cameron is working with layers in that film. He's always placing multiple screens and panels and things in front of characters. So he's just getting you used to, before you're going to get into the big spectacle, the amount of layers you can create between the frame and the main subject, right? And this is a movie they re-released Jaws in 3D over the summer, which a good movie.
Yeah, Jaws is good.
Was that a good movie to do in 3D though?
This is the thing. So you're like, is this going to be one of these shitty fucking post-production things? And the fact is, Spielberg's natural shooting style is so perfectly suited for 3D. You watch Jaws in 3D and you're like, it should have been this way the entire time. Not just the fact that obviously the movie takes place on the high seas and you have that innate depth and the infinite horizon behind it and all that sort of shit. But he frames his images in terms of where to draw your attention, and creating natural depth and movement, and the shot timing, that he's not someone who cuts too fast.
Right.
But there's that principle of 3D, you need to guide the audience's eyes. If you're changing their focus point too often, too rapidly, too wildly, it's another thing that causes a headache or confusion, the lack of orientation. And this is one of those movies where if you watch Coraline flat, you're like, what fucking just mastery of shot composition Selick has and visual storytelling, because it then becomes Spielberg-y. Especially because I think his camera moves a lot less in this movie than it moves in his other films.
Yes.
And it's because he understands I can't overstimulate people.
Yes, I think it's really well done. Also, to Spielberg in 3D, there is that shot in E.T. where E.T. sticks his finger out and he just keeps it there and sort of waves it in the audience's face.
Mm-hmm.
It's
and he does the paddle ball.
Yeah, he does paddle ball. He does paddle ball. He throws a bunch of ping pongs at you.
E.T. comes out of the closet dressed as in the wig, but he's also carrying a 2x4 over his shoulder, and he's like, E.T. have to do construction.
Right.
So he swings it around.
He's
swinging it
trombone.
E.T. play trombone.
Okay, so opening sequence is great, and then we go to, they're moving into...
Yes, the Coraline, the Joneses.
Yes.
And not the Joneses from that John Hamm movie.
Keeping up with.
Are moving to Ashland, Oregon. This is set in Oregon.
Yep.
I guess.
Shout out to Laika.
Hat tip to Laika. Right. The Pink Palace Apartments.
Nice.
An old, manse that's been cut up into apartments.
And we see a great three-planed image of the big apartment with Bobinski on top and the cat on the sign.
Yeah. So who lives here? You got the landlady who you never meet.
No.
And her son, Wybie, grandson.
You meet her at the very end.
Do you meet her?
That's the end of the film.
I guess she is there. Yeah. No, right.
Yeah, Wybie's
her grandson.
Yeah. Yes.
You've got Babinski, the sort of, he's supposed to be like a Chernobyl liquidator, right? Like he was like he's a Russian immigrant.
Yeah.
You've got Mrs. Spink and Mrs. Forcible.
Frances Saunders. A real recurring, because Wendell and Wild has the two nuns.
Yes.
You obviously have the two aunts, Spiker and Sponge, and James the Giant Peach. I feel like the witches in Nightmare form a similar thing. He loves the sort of two intertwined old ladies.
There's the double-faced person in Monkey Bone, right?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
yeah,
sure.
Well, it was funny. There's a couple of notes about the movie where I was like, this is a real Henry Selick character.
Yes.
Is a real Henry Selick moment.
Yes.
Like there's certain because it's worth noting. So Neil Gaiman wrote the book. Henry Selick wrote the screenplay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. At Gaiman's behest.
Yes.
Gaiman was like, you do what you want to do with it.
Yes.
Like, I
Selick's
trust
got
you.
sole credit on
Yes,
this.
sole credit.
He does.
Yeah.
And he had that script. I mean, they rewrote it many times,
Yeah.
but like, he had that script long before like Laika existed.
Yeah.
Like, that was like his thing. And obviously there were talks of being live action. Like,
Yeah.
it could have been a lot of things. So Coraline is the coolest character in the history of cinema. She's got blue hair and a raincoat. I think she's so fucking cool.
Yes.
Like somewhere where I'm like, I wish I was friends with this person when I was 10 and we could have like adventures.
Can I
you know
also
what I
just
mean?
quickly call out?
I guess I'm kind of a YB in a way because YB clearly just wants to be her pal.
You're
right?
a YB.
Yeah.
The two movers.
No, you're a YB, okay?
Okay. Fuck,
I'm
I am.
a. Well, I guess there's no one in this where
Belinsky?
you're like, I'm the cat, okay?
Yeah.
That's the coolest character.
The two movers.
Yeah.
Are modeled after the Ramft brothers.
Oh, that's cute.
Jerome Ramft, who's still alive, but this is Selick's tribute to Joe Ramft, who's the one who takes the shitty tip and sort of gives the the look to camera.
Yeah.
But yeah, Ramft had died a couple years before this. This is Selick's
Yeah.
first movie since he passed, who had obviously worked on his previous films.
Absolutely.
And a legend.
I just want to
a
mention
legend and
that.
apparently
It's a
lovely
very sweet
man.
tribute. But
Yeah.
yes, okay, so Coraline, coolest girl in the universe.
Using a stick as
So
a
cool.
dowsing rod.
Yeah, that's the
Which I
other
don't
thing.
Love.
Why don't you love that?
Well, because again, so I'm a little infected because I reread the book in anticipation of this. And so the book is so lovely because it's more just about this girl who's it's very Totoro when the kids find the new house and they're just sort of like wandering around. That's like the book is just this young girl who's like, I'm gonna go explore.
I'm exploring. I'm a kid.
Yeah.
Right. I love the dowsing rod thing because I did that when I was a kid. It's
Interesting.
that kid concept of like sort of very basic magic.
Right.
Where like I think one of my parents told me like, yeah, this is, some folkloric idea, right? You get one of these sticks and you can find water. And I was like, well, I can get a stick, right?
Yeah.
Like I don't need, this is not complicated witchcraft over here. So I would do that.
But I guess it
feels like a very
not,
kid thing to do.
It's a good story too because she finds the water and so it works. She finds the well. And that sort of alerts you to like maybe mystery is afoot here, and the well is within a fairy circle.
And the other thing is that the score's going, and you're like, all right, we're in a mysterious land right now.
Because the opening credits score is the like fully gothic thing, and then it goes into this choir
Whimsical.
Yeah.
But
Right.
like, what's so jarring is that she's got these parents who are regular.
Right.
And have like a flip phone and a car,
aggressively,
and like dress like normal people,
Right.
And like the dad's on a computer.
They're
like,
so distracted.
yeah, which I love, to be clear, but like it's so odd seeing it in stop motion because you're like, this is a fantasy world. I don't
Right.
understand. Like I've never seen anything
and
like this.
everything's so drab and earthy and quiet. And I just remember, this is one of those movies where I think much like you, JD, you're just like, I want this to fucking work. I want Selick to be out of jail. I want him to have a win. I was so nervous for this movie where I was like, I want it to be good and I want it to be a hit and I want people to like it, right? And the first visual reveal of the father,
Yeah.
when they cut to the reverse shot, because you're seeing him from behind and then you just see the world's most tired looking puppet.
God.
The whole cast
Yes.
is phenomenal.
Yes,
I think
agree.
Dakota
Even like
Fanning-
someone like Dakota Fanning is remarkable.
Terry
Incredible.
Hatcher is incredible.
Terry
That
Hatcher.
Hatcher is the one where you're like, that's such a funny moment where it's like, oh, she was sort of famous because of Desperate Housewives again, and it's like, is that why she got the role? And you're like, oh, do I take her seriously? And she's so good.
She's so
There's
good.
this
Because it's the dual role
Yes,
too. Like
yes.
she is the
But she
true
nails
dual
both.
role. Right? Yeah.
It's this interesting thing with animation because it takes so long that especially
exactly.
a big studio
Desperate Housewives
animation,
is hot in 2004, 5, 6.
Yes.
Like that's when it's like at its hottest.
especially a big studio animation. I think you see this a lot with DreamWorks where they are very star driven and want to load up their cast. Part of the casting process is trying to guess who's going to be a big star in 4 years. So DreamWorks will often cast a lot of like comedy actors who are popping in supporting roles,
Right.
who they would predict maybe by the time this movie comes out, they're like a bigger name. There's this guessing game. And when this movie gets announced, and it's like the cast is Dakota Fanning, Terry Hatcher, and the guy from the Apple commercials.
Right.
you're sort of like, are they going to have a film that comes out 4 years from now and the entire cast is dated? By the time this movie comes out, it's the year after Dakota has done Secret Life of Bees. She's sort of in her weird transitional period.
Like teen grown-up roles.
Terry Hatcher was cast when Desperate Housewives was at its peak.
I mean,
by the time this movie comes out, but it's no longer cultural juggernaut, right? I think the Mac campaign is like wrapping up at this point in time.
It's possible.
It is this thing, and then it's like everyone is fucking phenomenal in this cast.
Deadwood was canceled.
Deadwood was canceled. Yes, everyone was like cast at a peak point, going against what they would tell you to do, and you're like, "Is this going to be like Damaged Stars?" And everyone's fucking great in it.
Great.
I think Hodgman's performance is so good.
It's kind of key to the whole movie
because I think, and Terry Hatcher as well. I think both of them, they ground the film so much because they are the script of the parents is mean.
Yes.
The parents are kind of mean.
Yes.
Sure.
Which again, the book, they're not as mean, I don't think. In the movie, they're mean.
They're distracted 2000s people, you know what I mean?
But they're also pretty dismissive of Coraline in a way. And like, it puts you in Coraline's headspace where you're like, maybe I would want to be away from, but I think Terry Hatcher and John Hodgman both do such an amazing job of grounding those characters to something that still feels like there's love within the, and John Hodgman especially.
Distracted and overworked.
That's what I was
and
gonna
like
say.
Their kid is like, pay attention to me, and they're like, oh my
The way
God.
I was explaining it to Nelly is it feels like it's a Wednesday. It feels like it's the middle of the
it's
week.
a rainy
Jesus,
Wednesday.
Coraline, we're moving.
Afternoon.
Can't you fucking spend 45 minutes just hanging out on yourself?
Just the relief I felt when they cut to his face and then Hodgman's voice comes out of the puppet and everyone in the audience, every adult laughs, like a real laugh, not like a one-liner laugh, but this laugh of recognition of, I know exactly who this guy is and I know exactly how he feels right now. And I think every adult relates in a different way to a kid who's just like, oh, right, this is when my parents depress me or bum me out or bore me. But they're playing it so real.
And I think it's such good casting, and I think Hodgman and Terry Hatcher do such a good job. And John Hodgman, he brings this life to, like, you care for the father in a way that is really particular.
Yeah.
He's goofy and boring and all of these things together, and there's this lightness to him. It's funny because he's someone, too, who, again, you're like, oh, the guy from the Mac commercials.
Yeah.
But I think anytime I've seen him being given a role that has a there to it, like I really liked him in Mozart in the Jungle and his little side thing there. And like, there's
Hodgman's a great
he's
actor.
one of those guys where I'm like, I'd love to see him in more stuff. He can really bring, like,
he's very self-deprecating about his acting abilities. I think he always says, like, I don't really know what I'm doing and people pay me to do this and I'll show up and I'll do the one thing I can do. But as someone who has worked with him, he is an incredibly skilled actor. His sort of self-effacing quality is not a put on.
Yeah.
Like, on set, he'd be like, I don't know what I'm doing, but you're a real actor. And I'd be like, you're fucking good. You know what you're doing. He's a very, very skilled performer, but this is pretty early in the run of people actually giving him stuff to do. I mean, we talked about it in our fucking Evil Dead episode, but he has such a bizarre path to becoming a performer. And this is one of the first times that someone's giving him real meat outside of sort of just doing the Hodgman comedy persona.
And Terry Hatcher also, again, I think it's such a nuanced performance.
I agree.
And both of them, my gosh, their other performances.
Yes.
The alterations to their voice that they do. I really think this is really good. And Dakota Fanning she is so young when she's doing this.
Yeah, but she was one of those kid actors who just had such crazy poise. Like,
so
even in like,
weird. I think usually it's the thing
something.
with her is like, oh, this 6-year-old is talking like a 37-year-old.
Yeah, like
in this movie, she feels like such an 11-year-old.
Right, she feels absolutely
It's
just
the
like a
most
kid
she's
with
ever,
some tude.
right, you're like, this is just such a relatable kid.
And she's an uptown girl, one could call her.
She is.
She was in a movie called Uptown Girls.
Yeah.
That's what I was referencing.
That's true. That's true about her.
She was living in downtown world though.
Yeah, absolutely.
That was sort of the message of the movie.
But yeah, it's funny because this is right. Secret Life. She is. I mean, this is the same year as New Moon.
Yeah, wild.
Which she's probably like 18 at the point that it's coming out.
Takes so long that she's been working on this for 15 years.
Damn,
you know, she probably
like a whole goddamn career.
She gets cast when she's 11. It comes out when she's 15, probably. Right.
Okay, so we meet YB.
Yeah.
He shows up on a dirt bike.
Wyborn.
His name is Wyborn.
Kind of mean name.
It's mean, and she immediately like fucking
Picks
finds the bruise and pokes it of just like, why were you born?
Yeah,
she
really.
Look, that was a weird line that Selick put in there.
It does feel like classic 10,
exact
11-year-old
delivery
thing.
I just gave it.
That kind of like, well, boys and girls are at war with each other, right? We need to kind of be like ribbing each other at all times because we're enemies.
Well, also
in
this
the
like
great battle
funny
of childhood
thing with like Coraline is so bored and she's so annoyed that she's bored. That she moved to the shitty town, that her friends aren't there.
And this should be good. She has a new
friend.
friend.
Aren't paying attention to her. And the second a new friend shows up, she's like, "Hey, fuck you!
I'm not
interested.
I have friends. They're not here, and so I don't need you."
Yeah,
and also YB he's annoying. Like I love him. But he does kind of have that vibe of like, I don't know, I was just hanging out. And I'm like, no, you're not. You're like wannabe friends. Like
he's too vulnerable.
You don't know how to express it.
It's like uncomfortable.
And if it's Wyborn, that's
it's tough. It's tough that he's called Wyborn. He's very cute. That actor Robert Bailey Jr. Is on For All Mankind now. He's still hanging out, still working.
Jabuki Young White, the great comedian, tweeted
one of the great tweeters of all time.
Yes, one of his least antagonistic tweets of all time. He tweeted, "I don't think that animated movies should be remade in live action.
Except I should play Wyborn."
Yes.
Yeah, I mean,
it's now whenever I watch the movie, I'm just like, fuck yeah. I want to make it clear. Never, ever remake Coraline. It is funny how much he looks like this character.
They should remake Coraline in live action.
Did you guys have any things that people bullied you name-wise?
I've mentioned Save It Dims, which someone hit me with when I was 11.
I've talked about this on the podcast. I went through my fucking entire childhood, and I certainly got picked on. No one ever...
You had to have been picked on.
Yeah, of course. Yes, obviously. No one ever fucking cracked Sniffin' Poomin', which was right
Whoa.
there.
But that's
identified it at like 19.
Literary. Sniffin' Poomin'. I don't know. It feels just a little too clever.
No one ever threw that at me.
Ben, I feel like you were dishing them out.
Definitely.
I got a lot of like, Davy Crockett, right? That was just like still a thing you would call any David back when.
Yeah, sure.
Davy Crockett. Anyway, Wyborn, he's fun, and he has found a little rag doll that looks like Coraline with button eyes.
What a quinky-dink.
So he gives it to her. It's sort of the only interesting thing that's happened to her.
Right.
I do like that the dad's...
She's like, dolls.
Sure, she's getting a little old for dolls, but I do like that the dad is like, I don't know, go count the windows. I'm like, come on, guy, that's gonna take her like 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Like, although there are a lot of windows in the Pink Palace.
Yeah, they include it in the movie, but the book it's also make a list of everything that's blue, which I love.
Yeah, that is fun. I mean, I get it's just when the dad says windows, I'm like, man, you moved here without a plan, huh? Like you have an only child, you're moving to this place, and like all you've got for her is windows. Maybe buy her a Super Nintendo or something.
I just have to
imagine if that's the movie. It's just she plays Super Nintendo for an hour and a half.
Yeah.
I have to just read this quickly because recently, a fit of insomnia, whatever. I was texting you throughout this. I decided one night in a fit of mania to create a master list of every tie-in video game for a movie we've covered on this podcast.
Yes, and this does have a tie-in video game.
This does.
Yes.
This does. So
Never played it.
I was looking to see because I was like, I
was thinking about getting it to see.
I got a DS recently. I've been playing DS games, which I missed that whole era. And I was like, is the Coraline DS game worth playing? And I looked up the AV Club review, and I just want to read the opening paragraph of this because it's exactly what we just talked about. When Coraline's father tells her to count everything blue in the house, viewers of the stop-motion movie Coraline can clearly feel the pain of being a bored, neglected child. But when you're asked to perform the same time-wasting task as part of the Coraline game, you have to wonder whether you have better things to do.
I mean...
That's savage.
Look, this...
Then you would go to the other world, which was playing a different game.
Yeah.
This film does end in a, video game fans call a fetch quest, right? Yeah. Where she has to go find the hidden items, and that's how she's going to defeat the big boss.
A great final boss.
Yes. So I can see someone watching this and being like, I feel like this could be a video game.
This
they even have the NPC that's like, congrats, you got one. There's 3 left.
Right,
this is the end, basically, of the era where if you're making an animated film and you don't have a tie-in video game, you don't exist. It is perfunctory. It is assigned to you. No matter what. Something has to come out.
And when I saw 100%. Coraline, I was like, I wish I could be counting the stuff that's blue.
This game just sounds like it's a series of mini games, and they're mostly the games of when she's in the real world and bored.
But I would, yes, if I'm the game designer.
There's a whole level where you're walking on that stick and you're trying to balance.
But this is if I'm the fucking game designer and someone's like, well, she has to count the windows in the movie. Should we do that in the game? I'd be like, no, we can skip that. Let's have something. Maybe she fights a monster or something cool.
I feel like that game designer has like 10 IP games he has to finish that week.
I mean, that is
like,
the reality of it.
He's like, what? She counts stuff? Great. Yeah, sure.
God, that's an hour. Great.
Anyone else would just be like, I don't know. She has to like pick up coins and break blocks. Who gives a shit?
I mean,
it's a big part of the movie is she goes around and collects coins.
Yeah,
I watched a YouTube of the game. It actually looks all right, not the DS version, but like the Wii version,
and the whole voice cast did it, which is
it's you're walking around the house.
Yeah,
you know, it's all right.
PS2, Wii, and DS. I'm still probably gonna fucking buy.
I would have made Bobinski playable. That guy's fun.
Well, I just want like a fucking Bobinski like Call of Duty game. Like
wait, Call of Duty?
Yeah, he's like in
Bobinski first-person fighter. It's Call of Duty, but with his bare fists.
Like him training his mouse.
Chernobyl,
and shit, you know? Like you do a sequence game
honestly,
and then you get him to like do a little dance.
If they did like an Elden Ring style game with Coraline, where you can just like explore the lands between that'd be good.
It's funny you mentioned that, JD. This is your first time recording in our new studio. We have our offices here, Blank Check Productions.
Yeah, this is really nice. I'm looking around. I'm seeing.
Did you clock this too?
Walls, ceiling,
right. So we're talking about counting windows, and
right.
There's number one. There's no windows in here.
There are no windows in here.
But there's 1, 2,
box.
3. I guess does that count?
Yeah.
That's like there's 3 in whatever this is, but it's a really nice space.
Well, there's the front door to the hallway of the building. Then there's the door for a bathroom, and then
closet door, and then there's
there is that weird. It's the little.
What do you guys put in there?
We didn't put anything there. I mean, we just moved in
with the
here.
Space.
And it came with the
it's so small.
It was just kind
right
of
here?
painted over. I don't know.
I mean, there is a key that they left for it. I don't know.
For this little tiny door,
for
right
the little tiny door. Yeah, and you're pointing to it, of course. It's right there.
Right there.
Yeah, it's right there.
Anyway, so Coraline's bored and she's like counting.
Wait,
JD, what are you doing?
What?
Wait, okay, you're turning the latch. Okay.
Oh, wait, I'm over there. I didn't know I was going through the door.
Well, of course, you're clearly the one with the body built best for crawling through a tiny passageway. Why would I, the one built like a child, volunteer for this?
Yeah, and the one who knows what's happening through that door as well. But okay,
I'll do it.
No,
you want to do it? Really?
I'm gonna do it.
Okay, I'll do it gladly.
Here I go.
JD, what's going on in there?
Hey, JD, what's up? Wow, there's another podcast studio in here.
Oh my god.
Are they recording?
It seems like they are. Let me see if I can listen in.
Yeah, let's not interfere.
Yeah, I won't interfere.
But let's see if we can eavesdrop a little bit on. Is there like an other podcast guest?
Yes.
Okay, hold up your mic.
Other David, yes, I know you grew up in England. We all know. Okay, so let's just do the bit. What? No ding dong bell? No bit? Huh. I guess in this other world, it's not a big deal, and you're just allowed to own your own childhood, and no one makes a big joke out of it. That's good for you, Other David. Oh, and Other Griffin, I was reading Other Deadline this morning. Congratulations, apparently, on season 7 of The Tick. That's cool. And I guess you're about to start filming Draft Day 9, The Chronicles of Rick. I like this other place. This is good. But to answer your question, so right, you're absolutely right. That is not my voice singing the other father song. That is the voice of John Linnell of They Might Be Giants, who wrote that song. And what happened was the day before I went into Laika to record, the day before, I had a call from the wonderful director, Henry Selick, asking me, I forgot to ask, do you know how to do a Michigan accent, specifically an Upper Peninsula Michigan accent? And also, do you know how to sing? And as for the first part, I was like, I have no idea what you're talking about. No. And as for the second part, singing, I was like, sort of. And it was very nice. And he let me sing the song and we recorded it. And I did my best, but it did not surprise me at all when I saw the movie in the theater that I did not hear my voice and instead heard John Linnell's voice. And it did not bother me. because, it sounded better. It's his song. And John Linnell and John Flansburgh are both my heroes. And I thought it was kind of an honor to share a stop motion doll body with They Might Be Giants for however long that song was. But I do sing the song quite a bit in the shower, trying to get it right finally, I guess. And we're here in this kind of alternate other universe that you call it. So would it make any sense for me to sing my other version, the other version of the song from the other father? Would that be cool? Yeah, I'll take your eerie, unblinking silence as a yes. Okay, 1 and a 2, and you know what to do. Making up a song about Coraline. She's a peach, she's a doll, she's a friend of mine. She's as cute as a button in the eyes of anyone who ever laid eyes on Coraline. When she comes around exploring, Mom and I will never ever make it boring. Our eyes will be on Coraline. Fart. I said fart at the end there to indicate that this was clearly parody and therefore fair use. So you can't be sued. So wow. Well, that felt great. I tried to put a little other father spin on it there. I don't know. John Linnell's amazing, but that felt good to me. It was kind of a dream come true. I like this place. I'm glad I found that little weird door hidden behind those stacks of authors' copies of Vacation Land and Medallion Status available in paperback, and crawled through it here. Maybe I should stay here. What do you think? You all seem to be nodding silently. Hey, other Ben, why are you coming at my face now with that huge needle and that very unsanitary looking thread? What is it? Buttons? Buttons for eyes? No, thank you. No, I mean it. No, please, no. Ow, 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 ow. Take down on
David.
Yes.
You've got New Year's goals.
No, sure do. Same ones as ever. Get hot.
We all want to get hot. We're looking for a little bit of Triforce hotness this year. Hot David, hot Griffin, hot Ben. 3 of us want to get hot.
I'm making a triangle with my hands, and I'm worrying is that some sort of bad symbol. No, Hachi Machi.
What?
It's a teaser for a future episode.
Oh, really?
Yeah, remember he said Hachi Machi.
Oh, yeah, funny. Listen.
That was me.
David?
Yes.
Ben?
Yeah.
I got advice. Skip the grocery store. Take control of your time and budget with delicious recipes delivered right to your door.
That's right. It's HelloFresh. You're going to get farm fresh, pre-portioned ingredients, seasonal recipes.
Yep.
You can skip trips to the grocery store. You can make home cooking easy, fun, and affordable. It's America's #1 meal kit.
And they got a festive fair collection. Feels like it needs to be said with some flair.
Festive fair!
The festive fair collection.
Like you're some old-timey, carnival barker?
Yes, features limited time recipes made with seasonal produce and premium protein. I feel like now I'm just
you're
doing the video archives ad read.
Look, really nice sounding recipes here. Falafel power bowls. Seared steak and potatoes with béarnaise sauce.
I love a good béarnaise sauce.
Southwest pork and bean burritos. Look, eating well in the new year can be stress-free and delicious with HelloFresh. They got over 35 weekly recipes, right?
Yep.
You can choose, the kinds of things you might be aiming for. Calorie smart, carb smart, these kinds of categories they've got.
Yes.
Did you know that HelloFresh helps you save money all year round? It's cheaper than grocery shopping and 25% cheaper than takeout. Okay, you knew that already.
Look. And
you can skip that snowy schlep. You snip it right out of your life with a skip.
Yeah, snip the skipping.
It's HelloFresh. I've used it a lot. It's so easy when you're a tired dad and it's time to make dinner and all the, ingredients are portioned out for you with ease.
And you feel like you're on a cooking show, kind of.
Sure.
Do you know what I mean? Where it's like
you can make the little bowls of stuff. Yeah,
everything's portioned out. You can kind of really get into sort of that that mindset.
Yeah, look, and we've been sponsored by Green Chef before in the past, and Green Chef is now owned by HelloFresh. So with a wider array of meal plans to choose from, there's something for everyone. I personally, David, I love switching between the brands because I'm Verse. And now my listeners can enjoy both brands at a discount with me.
Go to HelloFresh.com/check21 and use code check21 for 21 free meals plus free shipping. That's HelloFresh.com/check21, code check21 for 21 free meals plus free shipping. It's America's #1 meal kit. All right, so we're 10 minutes into the movie.
She pretty quickly discovers this door. It happens very early in the film, which I like.
I'm back, right?
Yeah, you're
canonically.
back.
You're canonically back. Well, the mouse leads it to her at night.
Right.
And she meets
Peeling
in this other world.
wallpaper, and she finds the little door. She cracks it open. The tunnel
Tunnel's
unfurls,
very cool, as we mentioned.
The language
tunnel,
of cinema's changed forever.
Yes. The next thing that I want to point out, number one, I love the other performances. John Hodgman has this sort of southern drawl.
Ooh, I can't really do it.
Folksy,
Coraline. Like it's a little.
It's a funny. You're sort of like, how are they going to make this guy fun? Right?
Yeah.
Right.
Like with the mom, you get it that she's nurturing and she's attentive. She's making her kid food. Like it's all this stuff. Because whatever, you can tell that the mom in the real world is like, can we just order takeout? I'm busy. I'm distracted.
What's that line where she's like, for two people who write about plants all day, you sure hate dirt? Like it's this thing of like, what you do is boring and you don't even like it when I can find a fun version
to a kid
of it.
of like, this is it. This is what. Anyway, but Hodgman, like his other version, right, is this kind of like sort of, how do you describe, like loopy sort of showman?
But it is this weird.
It's like sort of swinger dad.
Yeah, I like that
this
he's
Bing
not
Crosby energy.
Yeah,
and
he's not like some like cool sunglasses wearing.
No, but it's like smoking jacket,
hot
pipe.
dad.
He reminds me of
dad.
the dad of like you go to a friend's house and it's the dad who you're like, ooh, that dad's fun.
No, so he's got this incredible piano with giant mechanical hands
which
that
is
come
very
out,
cool.
reach out into the audience.
What's
in 3D.
better than a white glove puppet hand thing?
So
and then he sings a song about how great his daughter is.
So
how cool she is. She's a pal of his.
Nice of him.
Let's talk about this for a second.
Yeah.
The one place where it is not our friend John Hodgman, it is instead
John Linnell.
John Linnell of They Might Be Giants.
Yes.
Flansburgh and Linnell did, I believe, like 12 songs.
Yes. This at one point was going to be a full-on musical, which is interesting because there is a Coraline stage musical that I believe premieres in New York City the same year as this. Like there are two Coraline
it's a parallel
musicals
project,
that are completely separate going on, but this was going to be a full like 12-song musical.
And I think it is such a shame that full They Might Be Giants version of the music for this never saw the light of day. That this is the only thing left over is this one song.
You have the song that the French and Saunders did. Did they not do that song?
No, I think this is it.
There's the one other musical number in the movie when she sees them perform.
Sure.
Yeah, I don't know if they wrote
that is what is that? What is that? That's Nellie Jean. What's the song called?
Oh, sure.
Because the only thing John Linnell wrote is the Other Father song, which he performs.
Yes.
The point is, there's a whole They Might Be Giants. Like there's like a They Might Be Giants songs throughout.
Yes.
Right. They wrote 10 songs.
We need those songs.
I mean, at the very least,
like
release it as a fucking album. It's been over a decade. Give us the like.
It makes sense that he was like, this movie is melancholy. I want this choral, score and all that. It makes total, and this is a movie about a lonely girl.
Right.
It fits that vibe. But I guess I get what you're saying of just like, I'd like to hear the music.
Yes.
Like,
if they just happen to show up online somewhere, because I'm sure they're owned by whoever.
I don't know. I mean, that shit always comes down to how contracts were.
Yeah.
I would love if that snuck out into the world. Wouldn't that be so fun
Chili
to get?
T own that album now?
Yeah, he might actually.
Does
he might
he own
actually be
those
planning
songs?
on.
He just privately records over it.
Right, with Bumblebee.
Can I just read a great quote here from Selick?
Yeah.
That is, it's from Portland Monthly.
Sure.
An article called Hollywood Nights from February 2009 talking about the inception of Laika.
Yeah.
And Selick's talking about how much they supported him in his vision. And he says, Coraline was a huge risk, but these days in animation, the safest bet is to take a risk.
That's nicely put.
That's nice.
Isn't that nice?
Of course, it is the kind of thing Henry Selick would say when he's trying to get you to fund his movie. And
Sure.
I've thought about it, and this is actually the safest move for you. But anyway,
Here's how I would describe Other Father. He's the kind of dad who listens to They Might Be Giants.
Yes.
Yeah, sure.
Yes. It's a perfect
fit.
Perfect for a preteen kid.
Yes.
Like a teenage kid might think like, oh, dad, you're being, you're being all showy
But you
and
talk
silly.
about like, what does she want out of her dad? Attention.
Yeah. Well, she wants attention out of her parents. Absolutely.
Right. When she first goes into her dad's office, he's on the computer. He doesn't even fucking turn around to look at her. His eyes are fixed to the screen. He's mopey. He's depressed. He's got bad posture. His skin is like fucking melting off his face. This dad turns around immediately. He fucking sings about how cool she is. He makes her feel special.
I will say one of my favorite lines is she meets her other parents who then create this huge dinner for her.
Yes.
And it's raining.
You mentioned they got button eyes.
Yes.
They do have button eyes, but they also have mango like smoothies or whatever for her.
But I love that the first thing they offer to her is they're like, let's go play tag outside in the rain.
Yes.
Her parents are like, ooh, let's go play tag in the rain, which is like, I think that's such a wonderful little detail of like, to a kid, their dream is that their parents want to go play tag, even though it's raining outside.
Because when you're a kid, it's like, can I do this? And they're like, no. Why not? Because it's raining. Because that's dangerous. Because it's all the
because it's dinner time.
Stupid
because
kid.
You're gonna attract mud.
100%.
Because it's illegal. You'll be arrested.
Because you can't push me down, Benjamin. That's not nice.
Like it's like when my
people.
daughter's like, I want that knife, and I'm like, you can't have the knife. You're a toddler, and she's understandably is like, I want the knife. Like, there's no good reason
You've said
for
yes
this.
to me for most of the things in my life.
I wish to walk around the house.
Knife was her first word, right?
Knife. That would be disturbing.
It leads to my favorite line of one of my favorite lines of John Hodgman's in this is he goes, "We love mud here."
It is an
like
amazing line.
other fathers like, "We love mud," as if it's like that's like we love mud in this world.
Hell yeah.
I love it.
Obviously, also her neighbors are more fun in the parallel world, but I guess we don't really grapple with them until later.
She doesn't meet them until she
goes to sleep right now. Which, by the way, this is a moment where I had a very Selick character. She goes into her other bedroom, and all the toys are alive.
Yes,
and there's the one octopus that goes, "What's shaking, baby?" And I'm like, that's the most Selick character.
Yeah.
I think in every movie there's like some little sort of like crass. It's
the Bone Daddy,
centipede,
saxophone player character in that.
Just a little character that like says a little thing that you're like, get out of here.
Someone who's like a 30s gangster.
Yeah, exactly.
I could tell though that something
there's the
was
lobster
off
face guy in Monkey Bone.
As soon as she goes to bed and they watch her sleep, that ain't right.
No.
I know it's supposed to be like, oh, isn't that sweet? They're being so nurturing.
No.
I'm like,
No.
There is something not right about that.
Yeah.
You don't like your toys watching you?
Well, that my parents with button eyes watch.
Well, I was going to say, that's another thing that's not right about them is that they have buttons for eyes.
Yes.
Yeah, she's sort of skirting past that.
It's such a good, like, when you're someone like Gaiman trying to write a modern day fairy tale, which is a hard task because you have had centuries. It's one of the oldest storytelling forms.
Yeah.
And one that really persists to this day, right? Like, the classic fairy tales have a stickiness that a lot of other works from those eras do not, and relevance in our current culture. Hard to come up with a new concept that someone has not already tapped into because they sort of so thoroughly mined the primal fears and desires of a child,
Mm-hmm.
Button Eyes is such a fucking good idea. There's something so upsetting about it.
Yeah.
Like, and the notion of the stitching.
Needles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Something that looks close enough to an eye, but is dead.
Yeah.
And
It's
feels
great.
upsetting to think about being actually permanently affixed to your face.
And when they introduce those to her later, it's like one of the scariest lines when other fathers like, needles so sharp you won't feel it. You're
Yes.
just like, ugh, what?
I also like black is customary.
Yeah.
Like, but then they're like, but you can have another color if you
It's
want,
so
as if
good.
that makes it better.
So she wakes up in real
wakes
life,
up. I
meets
like
her
the idea that
neighbors.
it's like she's getting a taste of it.
Yes.
Like this is how the other mother's getting her. Like, just give you a little bit.
Which, most of these Wizard of Oz type stories we talk about, once they go into the place, they stay there.
Yeah.
Maybe they jump out one time, There's something interesting about the fact that this is really about her maintaining like this dual life for a good chunk of the running time.
But when she goes back the second time, she meets other YB who is mute.
Right. We
Her
also
dream.
meet Bobinski.
Well, when she wakes up, she meets
You mean
Babinski,
real Babinski.
real Babinski.
Real Babinski,
she meets
which is
real.
And
His animation
Spink and
is
Forcible.
stellar.
I was going to
Yes.
say, is the example of you're introduced to him, hanging upside down on his hands,
Yeah.
flexing, And he's the guy where I'm like, I can't wait to see how this fucking guy moves.
He's like Jack Skellington with a big old beer belly.
He's like Jack Skellington with the mirror
yes.
on his legs.
He's like a little ball of mashed potatoes with the toothpick sticking out.
And he has a line that I love, which is, again, in the book as well. It's like the moment that's chilling where he's like, he comes back and he's like, oh, the mice want me to tell you, don't go inside that little door.
Yeah.
Right. She's
and getting
like, warnings of like, don't do this.
And like, you're like, oh, Bobinski's sort of this guy that's a little out there and thinks, and then when the mice are like telling her things that are real, then you're like, oh, whoa.
He's fucking the only adult paying attention on the wavelength.
Right. Because Spink and
he doesn't even, he's like, who knows what it means then?
Sure.
But Spink and Forcible, the ladies who I love as well, they're more like, they do have insight, but it's like they don't even know. They're like, and then they give her a peep stone later. You know, where they're like, they actually are smart.
Yes,
but they're so dotty. You wouldn't.
And they're so obsessed with their past.
Yes.
It's about. I mean, it's why Coraline fantasizes about them being able to fucking unwrap and reveal
and turn into young
also
versions of themselves.
Spink's cheeks.
So Spink is the short one
yes.
with the cheeks that wobble. It's just such good animation.
I love her dogs.
Yeah, and
I love
Forcible. How would you describe Forcible?
I would say
like what on her is notable and moves a lot.
What feels like it was definitely designed
for 3D, like almost the most protrudent element.
Yes, Forcible is
oh wait, here I'm looking down at my notes. It says the titties question mark
tickle bitties.
Yeah.
And she also has
it's bonkers that this is the design.
It's such a funny design though. I think it's so funny
for a kids movie though. I mean, and I know this is like of a certain age. Well, that's interesting. I wonder what they were like. But,
wild.
Yeah, I'm sure. But like, is it like they're burlesque performers? Is this like a little not appropriate?
I think the best kids,
so, but that's what's fun about this movie is kind of like on that edge.
That's a little inappropriate.
I think it's a thing we've lost.
I don't know how I
fucking
feel about
Dumbo
this, to
and
be
people are getting
it's
dead drunk.
that thing when you're a kid where you really zero in on someone's like some physical attribute of an adult in a way that's inappropriate, and like how kids will be like pointing something
just
out
say
that they shouldn't, you know, like you don't have, you know, you're missing a leg, or you have one eye, or so, you know, that you're not supposed to talk about,
get
or
past
whatever.
the cheeks and the boobs.
Yes, so like everyone in this movie is excited, but the same Bobinski, he's got the giant belly and everything else. Is skinny,
the dogs are so great too. I
mean, the idea of knitting the angel wings for the dog that's still alive, because she's just like, well, he's gonna die.
There's a Selick thing to creating models of characters that defy physics.
Yes.
When things are hand-drawn or CGI, you don't think about it as much because it's not an actual weighted object existing in the world.
Right.
But when you look at these dogs and you're like, they could not stand up. The disproportionate relationship of their head and their jowls to the rest of their bodies.
Yeah, Forcible would be in a wheelchair.
Yes. Yes.
She would not be okay.
Yes.
No, I think she'd be fine. What do you mean? Totally normal. No, and that's all cool. And then she goes back to the other world. She meets YB again, who is mute.
Yeah.
She meets the cat in her second trip. I know, but he speaks to her, I believe.
And it's the same cat. He is moving between the worlds.
Yes,
this is not an other cat. He's the one who sees it.
Only in the other world can he speak with the beautiful sonorous tones of Keith David.
Right.
Always a good.
Yes, great.
We also, so we go into the other world. Mm-hmm. And that's when we have the garden sequence. Which
very cool.
The garden sequence is one of the great animated sequences.
I mean, the reveal of the garden
of her face
in the shape of her face.
Right.
Yeah.
Can I say that I think the mouse sequence is even better?
Yes.
Because that's the one where I'm like,
these are two showstoppers.
Good Lord, how much effort did this take?
There's a reason they make that the sort of pull back the curtain thing at the end of the credits.
Yes.
I will say because
it looks like a fucking zoetrope.
Yeah.
And in 3D,
the synchronization of it and all that. Yeah.
In 3D, the garden is incredible.
Yes.
Because you're seeing all of these things moving. In 2D, it's good. Mm-hmm. But in 3D, I remember just feeling like a pure dreamlike happiness in the theater, being like, this is what it feels like to be within joy.
It's another thing too where Selick understands the most effective way to use 3D is to know when to withhold it.
Yeah.
So like making the opening more flat so that it will really, really call your attention to it when she goes into the other world. And similarly, that sequence, you haven't had a lot of things protruding out at you.
Right.
I just remember there's sort of the perspective shift as you go to the overhead shot.
Yeah.
But also while that's happening, all the sort of flora starts acting up. It's all moving and sprouting.
It does the nightmare unfurling moment where you're like, oh, right.
Incredible. Like stunning, gaspy stuff.
They also establish in a very funny way, the big robotic grasshopper that the dad drives. And you're like, well, this won't turn evil later for sure.
Right.
But it's also so funny because it's like, what do my parents do? They're like concerned with like agriculture, like, but in the world's most boring way, they don't even like dirt. They just look at computer screens and write shit all day. Yeah. And it's like, if my parents are going to have a job like this, I want them to be riding a giant mechanical praying mantis grasshopper, like digging around, making a flower bed in the shape of my face.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We also have dinner where we get another great John Hodgman line. I love dinner breakfast food.
I mean, a classic kid fantasy, or it's sometimes a reality, but right? What does a kid love more than breakfast or dinner, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I don't know.
That's
Reese's for breakfast, I would say, maybe.
Other Wybie and Other Bobinski. And up with Other Bobinski is where we see all these, again, very Henry Selick little machines.
Yes.
That like have the like deep boop beep. Like there's a bunch of that. It reminds me of all the Christmas Town stuff.
Yes.
Nightmare,
yes. Where they're all sort of clockwork.
Where it's like these little clockwork machines that like and like cotton candy comes out and all this stuff. And then yes, the Mouse Circus, which I mean, what a feat of stop motion. It's hundreds of characters.
It's him knowing, like, am I ever going to get this budget again?
And they had
the
to
studio going to shut down after one movie?
They had to individually 3D print every one of those frames of every one of those mice.
How do you make them jump? That must be annoying.
They put, you CGI out
the like
metal.
Yeah.
But it's absolutely insane. And there's
that's
hundreds
cheating.
of them.
I'm out on this movie. They cheated. You got to make it jump itself.
Yeah. All of your Atlantic reviews have gotten very weird when you've been judging them based on whether they're real or not.
my review just stops in the middle. And I'm like, wait a second, they faked this. Cheat.
The filmmakers clearly thought I wouldn't recognize this man as Mr. Tom Hanks from previous films.
It's not Otto at all.
You're reviewing movies now like you're Mystery Inc.
So on her third visit is obviously when it turns malevolent, when they're like, you can stay here forever.
Yeah.
I also, we have the moment where we go into real life town that I really like because we get against some very Selick characters.
Yes.
He always has to have street musicians at some point.
Love them.
Mm-hmm.
He also, a very Selick thing is the weird stop motion character that crosses in front of like there's a lady that like waddles across and I'm like, that's every Henry Selick movie has some weird like waddling foreground character that it's like they're just like to some animator like, I don't know, make this fun for 3 seconds, which I absolutely love.
Breaking animation news: Hayao Miyazaki's new film is basically done. Apparently.
Wow,
that's cool.
So
anyway,
probably come out
next year,
23?
hopefully, or at least maybe in Japan.
Anyway,
apparently it took them 1 minute per month of animation, is what they say.
Hey now,
wow.
So anyway, what else happens in Coraline? Oh yeah, that's when that's when things turn sour.
Then she goes back. That's when she meets the cat. That's when we get the forcible and spink performance.
Yeah,
that is like
doesn't she get trapped in the mirror? In between those two, that's when she meets the ghosts.
Yes.
And they are like
there's
the
a
ragdoll
lineage
her
here.
eyes.
Yes,
yeah.
It's after the dinner for breakfast, I think. Right?
Yeah. I mean, look, it doesn't matter. It's fine.
But these this character does not exist solely in relation to her. This is the Beldam.
It's Beldam. She's the Beldam.
But she has trapped, ensnared children before. This is what she sort of preys upon is the lack of fulfillment in children's lives, assuming the role of the parent they wish they had until she lures them in. And now there are these 3 ghost children.
So Coraline is going to be trapped. She and then her parents get kidnapped. Her parents are gone. And she escapes from the mirror world.
Yes.
Yes.
Exactly.
And so that's when she proposes the game of like, let me try and
we also
find the
see
items.
the forcible and spink performance.
Yes, which is very, very unnerving and cool.
And that's the moment when it's like
them unzipping themselves is
even
Coraline's
like
shit.
Coraline's like she's like naked practically.
Right.
Like that's like a line Coraline has.
That's another thing that I remember getting like a huge cathartic laugh from all the grown-ups in the audience when Coraline calls out, like, should we be seeing this?
Yeah.
Because like already you're like, I cannot believe they're putting boobs this big in an animated film in 3D. And then she comes out wearing
Should I be watching? Is this for kids?
Yeah, now she's like almost topless.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's when you have the sequence where they're pulling the levers and changing the sets, which is such incredible sort of like once again, just like 3D fucking show off shit where you're like changing the.
Yeah.
It's so good.
Now, I think this is a 5-star movie. I love this movie.
Yeah.
I do think the fetch quest is maybe the least interesting part, just because it feels like the movie's like, okay,
there has to be.
She has to do this. We're running out of time
anyway. I agree with you. I think they do it pretty quickly.
They do it quickly. That's
and
the
I
thing.
Also, the thing I'll defend most about it is that you've at least set up within the movie this character becoming very skilled at creating games for herself.
Yes.
In order to keep herself occupied. The only child thing. Where you're like, this is the special skill. This is the wax on, wax off moment.
Yeah, it's so crucial to kids' stories that like she's got a clever way to out of it. Yeah.
Right. What is she specifically trained for that she never even realized is her greatest asset? Yeah.
Right.
And I think it's the main thing of the book. So the book has a lot less plot stuff going on.
Mm-hmm.
And so when she's given the rock with the hole in it, that's like, what's that for? And then this fetch quest is sort of like the only thing.
Yeah,
sure.
And so I think it's harder in this one because there's other stuff going on. So then you're like, oh, a new thing? This like fetch quest?
And again, it just, they take care of it quickly because it needs to be done quickly.
Exactly.
Which is fine.
Man, I also love the moment of Coraline going around with the cat and realizing that the artifice of the environment,
the world is limited.
The way that's
the mom
done,
built.
the way that's
so
all
fucking
visualized.
Yes,
there's so much in there that is so nuanced, and I don't know. You can draw so much from that in so many different ways. Like different people can really read into that in different ways. I think it's brilliant.
And I love that they use a lot of the illustrator Tadahiro Usagi, like his style of those sort of like viney kind of things. Like it feels very of his style that when things start disappearing and turning away, like I like that aesthetic.
It's the thing I love about Laika is they really embrace asymmetrical design, which so much of animation is symmetrical, round, balanced.
Do we like the other mother's arachnid monster form?
Yeah, here's the thing I love about it is much like Miss Spider in James the Giant Peach.
It turns you all the way on?
Well, step on me.
Okay, your
Spider other mother.
Just he brought a Miss Spider. No, what
JD Amato now has 50% stake in Blank Check Media. No, I think once again it's a character design that allows Selick to strip away the stop motion puppets to their essence. A lot of this form of Other Mother, especially her hands and stuff, feels like he's actually just using the underlying armature of
especially once
these puppets.
You've got her skeleton hand, at the end there. Pretty cool.
And her sort of fractured ceramic, shattered face. Yeah.
And like even like the sets start, all the colors going away, and they start. It's like the stop motion universe is becoming unveiled to be a fake stop motion universe.
Yes.
Which is the story.
And going back to the opening of the film.
Yeah.
Where we're seeing,
yes. I also want to point out that Terry Hatcher followed this up with great voice work in Planes and Planes Fire and Rescue.
What's the name of her character?
Dottie.
Great.
Yeah, I also like the big bug armoire thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
think that thing's cool.
That house becomes more insect
bug-like,
ish.
I love a good fake out ending.
Yeah, well, of course she does defeat the Beldam. She rescues her parents. She's back home,
and it feels genuine. It does,
and it is kind of genuine. Like she mostly has accomplished.
And I love the them being covered in the snow, being like, "What are you talking about? We just got home. Nothing weird has happened." And she's like, "There's snow on you. I know. There's tangible proof that this really happened. It wasn't a dream."
So satisfying as a kid, that ending where you're like, "I'm the only one who knows that something weird happened."
Right.
But there's the evidence, the physical evidence.
There's the little thing,
in my head.
whatever it is.
Yeah.
They're like, you're like, was it a dream? And then you like open your hand and there's a magic coin in it, and you're like, I guess not.
Which is the opposite of the from Time Bandits to End, which is like the most like.
Remind me, I haven't seen Time Bandits.
What, JD? I brought up at the end of Time Bandits in the James and the Giant Peach episode. I feel like that ending is very influential on Selick, and I came short of saying the ending just because the ending is so
insane that I don't want to ruin it even for a 30-plus-year-old movie.
Check out Time
and
Bandits.
Also, we have, another episode to record, so we don't need to talk about Time Bandits too much.
But I genuinely feel like even for an old
this
film...
door?
5 more minutes?
What's this door?
What's this TB door? Does it go to Tampa Bay? Sorry.
It's a call with a star of Time Bandits.
But yes, the ghosts show up. I do like that the ghosts are now happy little angels, not creepy ghosts.
No.
And they're like, thanks for saving us, but you do need to deal with her.
This isn't resolved.
Yeah, right. She's
I do like that
they're like, got away.
She's like, good, we're all safe. And they have a moment they're like,
no, really, we're okay.
Right.
Which I like when ghosts are like, yeah, we're good. You're in trouble.
Which is
there's only one
sort of
key.
focused on
you have it. She'll
Right.
stop at nothing to get it again. She will come for you again.
It like makes death this sort of thing where you're like, oh, that seems nice. And it's
The
like, well, you're
only
still alive.
true
So
escape.
Best
Yeah.
of luck. But that's their thing too. Is they're like, hey, the good news is you're still alive.
Right.
So that's great. You're not out of trouble, but you're alive.
That's the good news.
But she does
Enjoy it. Smoke them while you got them.
Successfully fend off the hand and destroy the key with the help of good little YB on his motorcycle and his cool mask.
Okay, here's my one. I think I keep doing this, so I'm not going to say this, but like what I like in the book is that Coraline comes up with a plan to kill the hand.
Okay.
And in here, she seems like she's like doesn't really totally have a plan. And it's like
YB gets
YB
the
has
hero
to,
moment.
Yeah,
sure.
But she's had a lot of hero moments already.
But what I like in the book is she like has this moment of like, I'm gonna take this on myself. I knew you were gonna say
the library. No, you're inviting it by being like, I know I keep talking about the book.
I feel like I'm usually that guy on the podcast, so I'm enjoying not having David razz me for comparing.
I liked how in the book it was all written down on a piece of paper.
It's
Okay.
my documentary.
All right, let's talk about 3D TV technology.
Oh fuck no, we're not doing that.
Rules.
Yes,
he's talked about his 3D TV quite a lot over the years. I will say.
I think
by he I mean Griffin.
It's still the thing that is the biggest red flag about Griffin is that
he still has a 3D TV.
3D TV.
You mean like
it
he invites a lady home and they see like the 3D goggles?
But like also like when he's with his therapist and he's like, hey, I think we've made a lot of progress. Maybe we can. And the therapist's like, tell me, do you still have your 3D TV? And he's like, yeah. And they're like, great, I'll see you on Tuesday. I'll see you on Tuesday.
And actually the rate's going up.
Yeah exactly.
You know what I like?
What?
Thanks for asking. Just that the final thing is that nice little party. And it's that Coraline is like, invite everyone, because even though they're weird, like, I want to see them.
Well, this is what one of the things that is nice about the way the character changes, right? Is she starts at the movie being like, this town fucking sucks.
Yeah.
I keep on looking at this photo of my 2 best friends who I can't see anymore.
And I do like
them.
whenever they come to life and they're like, we miss you,
right?
In the photo.
And she's like, I'm so fucking bored and lonely. And it's like, Coraline, you've moved into the world's weirdest neighborhood. Everyone in your immediate vicinity is fascinating. And she's like, fuck off. And by the end, she realizes like, oh, I'm like lucky that I get to have this odd childhood surrounded by the world's most bizarre grown-ups.
Well, I think that's the thing too, is that obviously this story
fucking bring Babinski over.
In its form, the base of the story is about an internal change, right? But what I like about the ending, especially here in the movie, right, at the end, is that when you bring those characters in, it also makes her change external, right? Yeah. So she's also come to realize that all of these people who she thinks are like boring or weird or whatever actually probably have these rich inner lives and rich pasts to them. Like, you know, she hasn't
changed them on a superficial level. She should find out who they are.
Right. Like she now sees Bobinski as this person that might be teaching these mice to do these amazing things or the Spink and Forcible or these crazy old like they're not just old people anymore.
Right.
And I love an end, you know, I love Labyrinth is like my favorite ending where it's like, oh, all the characters come back and have a party at the end.
And it's nice,
like,
isn't it? Yeah.
Just to have
just
the
see
characters
everybody.
Be like, great, we made it to the end of the movie. Let's have a party.
Yeah.
Like it's such a nice, fun. Every movie should end that way.
Yeah.
You can't name a movie that I don't think would be better, would be worse if all the characters at the end came together and had a party. All of them come together.
I was going to say there will be blood.
Yeah, exactly. Just some movie where everyone's dead. There will be blood. Would be fun.
Let's party. And I've got milkshakes for everyone.
Rodney Dangerfield pulls the cover off the golf bag and reveals a stereo system.
Why didn't you say so? Dun, dun,
Somebody's getting laid tonight.
Wait, why is he Sean Connery? He's Daniel Plainville.
Trying to do Daniel Plainville. I don't know.
Yeah, you know what else more movies should do? They should have 26 individual posters for every letter of the alphabet.
Heard a character poster. Did you ever hear a letter posters?
They've got one for every one. Every letter. Some of them are stretches.
This is the thing.
My child's bedroom will have every one of those posters on it.
Focus Features
Z
releases
for
this
Zanzibar
film.
Chocolate Beetles. Look, they had to really stretch for some.
It's an independent animation studio.
Y is for Yum because she eats food.
Potentially the future of this entire medium rests on the success of this movie. Not, to mention the success of this man being able to make another film ever again, this director. And Focus is releasing it, not even big Universal. So it's a specialty independent arm of a studio releasing a kids movie in the winter. Sure. They had to get very creative in how they marketed this movie.
Well, why don't we play the box office game where we can talk about what a success that was?
Look, success is not ultimately defined solely through box office.
No.
For someone who is obsessed with the box office,
of course,
I've certainly come around to the victories if the movie exists out in the world. And if they got away with it, they somehow got the money to make their vision.
Yeah, right.
And we're better for it culturally. But the relief I felt seeing this movie opening weekend and having it play well with an audience that was sold out, doing well the first weekend, and then fucking multiplying well.
Yeah, it was like it dropped 12% in its second weekend. Like it had very good staying
You're like,
power.
this keeps Laika in business for 20 years. This gives Selick another movie, even if it took fucking 13 years to make. Like, it just net positive for the culture that this movie was successful.
And as long as Michael Jordan brand is still pumping out the dollars, we're not worried about that box office.
This movie also is like so against the trends of animation at the time. Like, I really think I was worried it was going to be seen as dorky or quaint.
We have talked about, though, how we've mentioned how like the 5 Oscar nominees this year are Up, which wins Best Picture nominee as well, obviously. Coraline, Fantastic Mr. Fox, Princess and the Frog, and Secret of Kells. It's this like great. It looks like you just got a disturbance in the force. Both Ponyo and Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs don't make it in.
Is this one of the best animation years?
I think it's almost indisputable.
It is the one.
Like,
ever.
And it's like this
Every
sort of
other
broad...
lineup has one stinker in it, I would argue. You usually look at any category, any animation grouping from the Oscars since they started, and there's one movie where you're like, they had to round out the 3 or the 5.
But I'm just saying, is there a year that has had more...
I mean,
no, when you consider that the 2 things fucking left off the list are Cloudy
like
and Ponyo?
I want, obviously I would have Ponyo in there, and I would probably kick out Up.
But I'm saying,
I would too.
I'm saying
just sort of
people think we're fucking rude to Up, but we all have the same opinion, which is like, it's better than most movies and not as good as most Pixar movies.
I'm saying,
and
separate
Cloudy
from the
is a very cute movie.
Is there an animation year that has Fantastic Mr. Fox?
I don't know. I mean, probably not. It's hard to...
Coraline?
No.
I mean...
no.
I meant 2 stop-motion features came out in the same year?
Yes.
It's very cool.
And from like different studios. Like there's a diversity in every sense. It's a great lineup.
And this film made $75 million domestically and 126 worldwide. Very, very robust numbers.
Yes.
It opened, however...
I will say also, I looked when it came out on DVD, and that DVD was a red and blue... later they packaged this disc in with 3D TVs to incentivize people to buy it. Right.
I have the one with the 3D glasses, the red and blue one.
The red and blue one. First week, it did $20 million in DVD sales. It's a thing that Selick always talks about where they cap stop motion budgets. They'll never give them the same amount of money that they do CGI films or even hand-drawn films. And there's sort of a ceiling to how they can perform at the box office, but they linger for a long time. And I think Coraline has been a really consistent performer, and you still fucking see merch, constant Blu-ray releases. It's a highly profitable film that has kept Laika in business.
But it opens number 3 at the box office with $16 million. Behind, number 1 is a new entry.
Okay,
it's a comedy, an ensemble comedy.
February 2009.
Yeah, it's sort of Valentine's themed.
Is it Valentine's Day?
This is number 10?
Number 1.
Number 1 at the box office. 2009.
It's new this week, $27 million opening. It's based on a book that's based...
He's just not that into you.
On a phrase. He's just not that into you.
This is going to be the one
myself,
box office game where I feel like I have a shot.
Oh, this is
sure.
right.
Well,
because this is when I was in college.
Yes.
Did you see Ken Quappis's Quapis? Who can say
Quappis?
Ken Quappis's He's Just Not That
I
Into
don't think
You.
I did.
Once again,
Because you know, there's that
Don't
Sex and the
stay by
City
myself.
episode where Ron Livingston, I think it's Miranda's like, oh, the guy, he won't call me back, blah, blah, blah. What's going on? What's the game? And he's just like, he's just not that into you. And they treat it like it's like
an entire career
the
out
mystic knowledge of
he
men.
hosted a daytime talk show off of the success of that phrase. It is what like that's a deal breaker is making fun of in 30 Rock.
Exactly.
That he just built a cottage industry out of this.
Bad movie.
Yeah,
in my opinion. But it's sort of got that ensemble thing of like, well, maybe you like this storyline better than that storyline.
Connolly's kind of great in it.
Sure. When's she bad?
Never.
When is she bad? Never. Jennifer Goodwin is sort of like the soft star of it. And it was sort of this moment of like, oh, is Jennifer Goodwin? She's on Big Love. Like, is she about to be like America's next rom-com sweetie pie?
And then she gets caught up in Once Upon a Time for a Decade.
Ooh, what's this little door?
Justin Long
Goodwin door,
adding another character to his stable of horror movie icons.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah.
So that's number one at the box office. Number two is an action film that came out last week and surprised by doing quite well, making $24 million. But perhaps even more surprising is that it's dipping only 17%.
Now, I know what it is,
for
but I
an
want to see
action
because you
film.
said you feel like this
fairly
is a period. You might be good.
junky, cheap action film that no one saw coming as a big
I know
hit.
what it is. I'm going
And
to
a
text it to
franchise
David. I want
launcher.
to see if
Oh, he's
JD
gonna
can
take it.
guess.
I know you know what it is.
Okay.
I know you.
So
I
know
know you know.
Yeah.
Oh no.
We talked about it many times on these box
I know what it
office
is.
games. It and its sequels.
Because it's an action movie that's being dumped Super Bowl
truly
weekend,
dumped.
the
Yes.
worst weekend to release a movie for guys, and it overperforms that weekend and then holds so strong the
like
second weekend it becomes
crazy.
a phenomenon
Oh no, what is
and
it?
launches a
It
franchise.
dropped 17% this weekend. It drops 8% the next weekend.
I'll say
it's
this.
like
It becomes a franchise.
yes.
It fully mints this actor as an action star.
Yes.
Which he
He'd never
was
been
not
one,
prior,
and he's
but
older.
was already a major movie star, a serious actor, and he becomes a very unexpected late in life action star.
Yes.
What is it?
It's Taken,
Taken.
starring Mr. Liam Neeson, which has made $53 million.
Oh
in 2
my
weeks.
gosh.
He also had been released in Europe 2 years earlier. It was
maybe not 2 years, but had been
a
released.
while. It was
yes.
readily available online, and people were like, "Fox is dumping this. It's just gonna be nothing." And then it exploded.
Number 3 at the box office is Coraline.
Great movie.
Number 4 at the box office is also new. I would say an underperformer. It is a comedy sequel to a comedy remake that was perhaps ill-advised to begin with.
Okay.
And this is the sequel.
JD?
Pink
Griffin
Panther?
knows what it is, huh?
Pink Panther
Pin-
Returns.
the Pink Panther.
I wasn't gonna get it.
Dos.
Really?
Oh, no?
Good job.
Did you have a guess?
I didn't yet.
Okay, fair
I was gonna stew on it, but I didn't have an immediate guess.
Pink Panther Returns.
Harold's Walt.
I got one.
Yeah.
We're on the
Joint.
board.
I've never seen the Pink Panther 2 with
Cleese.
Steve Martin. Is Cleese in that
Cleese
one? Yes, he
replaces
is.
Klein as Dreyfus.
Yes, Cleese is
Yeah.
Dreyfus. You've got Alfred Molina, Andy Garcia, Emily Mortimer. It looks like they bring in
What's the Bollywood
an
star's
Indian actress.
name?
Yes, Ashiwaro.
She was
Rai.
supposed
she
to
was
be.
in Bride and Prejudice.
Everyone
and-
thought she was going to be a huge crossover deal.
yeah, and she's a gorgeous, charming star.
Do you know
but
who's
like
the
no
female
one's.
lead in the first Pink Panther remake? No one talks about this.
I talk about it
Beyonce.
daily. Beyonce's in it.
Right, because that was the period of time
Yeah,
when
it's Austin Powers, Fighting
Right.
Temptation. She
Yeah.
was doing movies.
Isn't it so funny that Beyonce was like Austin Powers, Pink Panther?
Yeah.
Like truly would not.
Obsessed.
Yeah.
She just did a bunch of movies. Obsessed, right?
and
That's
now
just-
it's like
yeah.
would never think of
Well,
doing
now
that.
it's like you can't even like do an interview with her
Right.
or whatever.
Right.
Like she's this sort of like Cleopatra level figure.
She made several
Not
mainstream
not
hits
Foxy Cleopatra, real Cleopatra.
that would feel beneath her now. And then she did 2 Oscar play movies, Dreamgirls and Cadillac Records, which she's phenomenal
her
in.
best performance.
And it now feels like she'll probably never do a movie again. Or if she does, she'll do it in 20 years. It'll be a big ass deal.
Well,
that
she
she's
was
like,
wasn't she Nala? In,
Yeah,
The
I
Lion
mean-
King.
will she play a role on camera again?
I don't know.
I don't know.
Yeah, well, it's fascinating because it's also people would be like, people
Obviously,
love to
she
put
does
people in a
things like
box.
Lemonade, which are sort of
Yeah.
like films in a way, like they're visual albums that are almost feature length, and she's very,
It's just funny to me
involved
that
on
she's
screen and off.
she made
Yes.
more movies than Whitney Houston, but she also never found her bodyguard.
Right.
Yes.
And
She
something like
didn't.
Dreamgirls that maybe should have been that for her. She's
But
so overshadowed.
I would
by,
I would always argue that she was like a very capable
Yeah.
star in these mediocre movies.
Yes, and
Like,
and once again, is
you wouldn't see
phenomenal
her.
in Cadillac Records. You're
She's
like,
great in
oh,
that. But like in Austin Powers,
Yes.
she's like quite charming.
She's like 20 in that movie, 19.
Yeah, and like
she's very funny in that movie.
Like Pink Panther, like she's very
I'm sure
capable.
She gives subtle nuance work.
Number 5 at the box office, another comedy. This is back in the day when, fucking winter, crappy Comedy Central.
Yeah.
What if a guy had this job? What if this guy had this job?
It's Paul Blart Mall Cop.
That's correct.
Right, because January 2009, Paul Blart and Taken, which are both sort of like dumps.
Yeah, like who cares?
Not only become like huge fucking like middle America word of mouth sensations, but suddenly like I guess these are our 2 biggest movie stars.
Yeah,
Kevin James and Liam Neeson. We have to build fucking franchises around these guys.
Henry Selick also directed Paul Blart, correct?
He did.
Yeah, he did.
It's wild to have 2 movies in the top 5 at the same. It's like
and he directed
Spielberg
the 6th
with War
film
Horse
here,
and Tintin.
which is Push. Not based on the novel by Sapphire.
Oh, Push
the sort of vaguely X-Men-y kind of movie, which Dakota Fanning is in, isn't she?
Yes.
Yeah.
And what is this?
Chris Evans.
This is right after or right before Jumper?
It's
Jumper
maybe right after
2008.
Jumper.
I remember there was a series of action films that were based on like a one-word magic ability.
Right, because I guess maybe Chris Evans can push people.
That's something like that. I don't know.
Dakota Fanning, Camilla Bell, Jaimin Honsu.
Precious.
I guess right. No, the heroes in Push are called pushers. That's like their designation.
Right.
Yeah, Precious comes out this fall,
but it's playing at Sundance January 2009, knowing that this movie's coming out a couple weeks later. And Lionsgate, when they buy it, is like, you got to change the title. Everyone is still going to, the cultural memory of
people
Push,
are so Push crazy.
6 months from now is going to be overwhelming.
But yes, so they renamed it.
I think Ben is negotiating something with a pizza delivery.
It's possible.
Feels like this is a tense standoff.
Other films at the box office, you got Slumdog Millionaire, and it's sort of carrying on from its Best Picture win.
Will never be talked about in this podcast.
Right. You've got Gran Torino, which is sort of the big surprise.
You can't not do it. I was going to do it if you weren't going to do it.
Gran Torino. Why don't you
come to your
senses?
But that's the other one. Fucking January, because it goes wide in January.
Huge
Gran Torino, Taken.
Old men
Paul
are
Blart.
seeing movies, goddammit.
But that's the thing. Those 3 movies in January, a dumping ground, feels like Hollywood being like, fuck, are we not making movies to like 50-year-old men in the Midwest?
You've got the mostly forgotten, The Uninvited, the American remake of A Tale of Two Sisters, directed by the Guard brothers, who I don't think ever made another movie.
On Guard.
And then you have, look, they said it couldn't be done.
What?
They said they couldn't do it.
What?
They said those dogs couldn't have a hotel, but they do.
Ben's not here to see it.
Because
he's negotiating the release of our pepperoni.
So that's your top 10 in the Coraline week. But yes, Coraline does very well.
Hotels for Dogs, JD, just to remind you, famously a movie that made Ben cry because he was so proud of them for pulling off that hotel.
David, just as a film critic at Atlantic, the hotel... Is it for dogs or run by dogs?
Both.
You're asking me that as a film critic for the Atlantic?
Yeah.
Yes, because you have a extrasensory ability to perceive and process film,
whether they fail or not. Whether they tricked you.
This hotel isn't for dogs at all. It's just for people, and there are dogs in it. Cheat. Ben, Hotel for Dogs. How dare you? Hotel for Dogs?
A+.
There you go.
Are the dogs? Is it for dogs or dogs operated?
Both, man.
Well, so but like the humans
dogs work there.
Emma Roberts is.
What's this little door?
What is? You know what? What is that little door? Go on.
It's a door.
Come on. Finish your bit.
Okay.
What's in the door?
Let's see.
We might send you in there and you might not come out for another 2 years. Where's JD? I went into the dog door. I don't know what to tell you. He was looking for a hotel.
An interview with a CGI dog.
Yes.
Can I say 2 things quickly?
You can.
1, additional micro merchandise spotlight. A cool thing about the Laika movies being funded by Phil Knight is that they always do shoes to tie into the movies.
I have this up.
Have you looked at what these fucking David, Google Coraline Nike Dunks. They are so fucking cool.
Okay, here we go.
And for this one,
they are cool.
They're so fucking cool.
Oh my God, yes.
Right? Oh, they've got little mice and cat on them.
And these were truly, they were so desperate to get attention for this movie, knowing that they didn't have the marketing budgets to compare with major studio animated releases, that these basically were only sent out to press to try to garner goodwill for the movie. And they go for thousands upon thousands of dollars.
It looks like
now.
in my size right now, I'd have to pay $6,000.
Do we think any NBA player ever played a game in
Coraline dunks?
Coraline
Okay,
dunks?
now I'll say the Paranorman sneakers look like something you could see on an NBA court.
Yes, that's what I was looking
They
at.
are my least favorite
They're
design-wise.
sort of glowy. They're green.
Right. Those are
neon
also
green.
really expensive.
Yeah.
The Missing Link and the Box Trolls ones seem to still maybe be in circulation at reasonable prices.
Cool. Yeah.
And
sure.
the Kubo ones are really cool. But I advise people to look into these just to stare at them and imagine having the disposable income to pay for these
Kubo
sneakers.
You'd like
You'd
to
be
stare
terrified
into
to
the
ever wear.
void of capitalism and have it stare back.
They're nice looking sneakers.
But none of them are as good as what's the shoe called in Elizabethtown?
Oh, the fuck. I don't know. Look it up.
What's the other thing you wanted to say?
Annie Awards. Because I've been doing little Annie.
Spasmodica.
Oh,
That's
well
the
done.
Elizabethtown shoe.
I've been doing little Annie Award check-ins on these episodes because it's relevant, right?
Okay, sure.
We didn't do it on the Nightmare episode, but or we did. No, we did on
I
the
don't
James the
remember.
Giant Peach episode.
Sure.
The Nightmare episode, it loses to Lion King. The only other film nominee is Batman: Mask of Phantasm.
Pretty decent 3 nominees.
Agreed. And it goes to show how much more limited the.
In 2009, the lineup is the same as the Oscars, but they just added Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs.
Good.
Well, where's Panya, though?
They put Miyazaki in for director.
Interesting. That feels almost more insulting. But
I was
sure.
going to say, the Nightmare year, they don't even have a Best Director category. They have Best Achievement in Creative Supervision, which Selick wins, beating out people like Bob Camp, creative director on Ren and Stimpy, Bruce Timm, producer on Batman the Animated Series, right?
We need to be done.
I know. This is the final fucking thing I'm saying.
You're doing the Nightmare on Elm Street category.
I was filling in a gap.
Uh-huh.
The voice performance category, which I'm always really interested by.
Right. To be clear, it lost to Up at the Annies.
Yeah.
Coraline
Up
did.
fucking won everything.
Up was a big deal.
Voice acting, Jennifer Cody wins for Princess and the Frog, which is a surprising winner. She plays the rival girl.
Yeah, that is weird.
Yes. A good performance.
Sure.
Jennifer Lewis is also nominated for Princess and the Frog, who's
She's
feel
great.
Makes a lot more sense
So
as a
much
winner. They nominate one cast member from Coraline, Dawn French. Kind of a weird choice to spotlight her over Saunders.
Right.
But also, that's not the one I would pick out of.
I think Fanning's performance is incredible, but then yes, I would pick Terry Hatcher or
Fanning,
John Hodgman.
David Hatcher all feel like more obvious nominations, or you nominate French and Saunders
Keith
together.
David, God bless him, you can't nominate him because then you're just nominating him every year for anything he ever did. Well, maybe you
Give
should.
him an honorary spot.
Yeah. The other nominees were Hugh Laurie for Monsters vs. Aliens and Leguizamo for Ice Age, I want to say 3? Yeah.
4, I think.
Dawn of the Dinosaurs. I don't know.
You're right. No, that's 3.
Yeah.
Pete Docter wins for
Directing,
Up, but Miyazaki gets the nomination there. Baumbach and Wes Anderson win screenplay.
Yeah, and Coraline not even nominated, which is stupid.
Yeah,
but it does win Best Music.
Uh-huh.
For that nice score.
I believe it wins
and
Best
for character design.
Yes.
So that's nice. That's nice.
David, I'm trying to end the episode.
What's in this door?
Oh, it's all the different types of 3D televisions we can talk about.
God.
Let's run through it.
All right, come on, done. We got to record
JD,
another
This
episode.
was so fun.
It was
Glad
so
to have you
fun.
back on the main feed.
It's good to be back.
And now we have to record another episode.
Hey,
that
this
you'll
might
all
be
have heard
one
a
of the
month ago.
longest ones, too.
Really?
Really?
Crying out loud.
I mean, because you had the Hodgman, you had the ads. If Griffin really fucking stretches one of them
Hodgman's
out.
going to do a tight
right.
45.
you better not stretch him out.
I mean, and we've got bits now in this
All right,
too.
we're done. Now I'm freaking out because we have to do ads. Jesus. All right.
Thank you all for listening. Please remember to rate, review, and subscribe. Thank you to Marie Barty for our social media and helping to produce the show. Thank you to AJ McKee and Alex Barron for our editing, Pat Reynolds, Joe Bowen for our artwork, Lane Montgomery and the Great American Novel for our theme song, JJ Birch for our research. You can go to blankcheckpod.com for some real nerdy shit. I think JD's responding to the fact that I now have to close my eyes when I'm doing the fucking rundown to make sure I get all the names
Meditative.
right.
Yeah.
Like I'm summoning some
summoning
fucking,
religious.
Truly, it becomes a stressful point in my life.
Blank Check Pod, links to some real nourishing, including Blank Check Patreon, where a month ago we will have done Talking the Moonwalk with JD, which we are recording about 30 minutes from now.
But right now on the main, on the Patreon, we're in the middle of Kotze. We're in Kotze town.
We're doing the Kotze trilogy.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's great. That's
that's exciting, right?
That's awesome.
We just committed to this. We think it's a good idea. It's a good way to start off the new year.
I'm saying it, so I'm like, it's on the record.
It's on
baby.
the fucking record. We can't
also,
back out now.
the films that I think the most should be using the Billy Lynn technology.
Yes, absolutely. Great argument. Tune in next week for Wendell and Wild.
Yeah.
Selick's newest film.
Yeah.
Which will be a couple months out.
His last film.
For now, don't wish any ill upon him.
I just mean the end of the miniseries.
Sure.
The end of this brief little miniseries.
Yeah, and we'll tell you what we're doing next.
Mm-hmm.
And as always, what's that door over there?
David, why don't you go through this one?
Why don't you go through this door?
Yeah, I'm going to go through this door and never come back.
What's on the other side?
Looks like our lunch.